Chapter 896. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. No one had expected that the divine emperor, who had appeared to be invincible and undefeatable earlier, would be so weak before Feng Xingjian. He had been defeated so easily. The over 10 disciples were stunned by the scene before them. Lu Ying and little Tanuki suddenly thought of the words that Feng Xingjian had said. Feng Xingjian had once said that he would be able to deal with the 6 heavenly generals single-handedly. By the looks of it, that was not the case. They had thought that Feng Xingjian was just spouting nonsense. However, by the looks of it, not only was he not spouting nonsense, but he was also being humble. Not only could he deal with the 6 heavenly generals, but even the entire Qiu Dao alliance would probably not be a match for him. Lu Ying said in a daze, so he wasn't lying. Thinking of how he had said some bad things behind Feng Xingjian's back, he could not help but feel regret. At the same time, he was also glad that he had been careful and had not offended Feng Xingjian directly. Ali also looked at Feng Xingjian and mumbled, "With such strength, he's probably invincible." Wang Shi, Zi Xing, and the others also heaved a sigh of relief. They had thought that it was over for them when they saw the divine emperor break through their ultimate moves so easily. They had not expected that after Feng Xingjian transformed, he would be able to crush the divine emperor completely, and the crisis would be over. Wang Shi smiled bitterly inwardly. To think that he had been thinking of using his full powers to defeat Feng Xingjian when they were fighting. Now that he thought about it, if he had really used his full powers, he would probably have been the one to be embarrassed. Luo Haonan smiled. He felt that Feng Xingjian, whom he had thought to be a ferocious tiger, had instantly turned into a divine dragon that could split the world apart. However, no matter what, this outcome was still a good one. Qiu Dao, Wan Tong, and Old Tian were not in such a good mood. Their countenances were extremely grim, especially Qiu Dao. His white-haired and benevolent appearance had now turned into a gloomy expression. He was like an old man-eating ghost from fairy tales. Wan Tong and Old Tian's expressions turned even uglier. When Feng Xingjian's gaze turned towards them, the 3 of them unwittingly bent their backs, unable to muster up any thoughts of resisting or running away. With the power that Feng Xingjian had just displayed, they had no chance of escaping. However, Qiu Dao was clearly unwilling to wait for death. He looked at Feng Xingjian and said, "Feng Xingjian, it's true that you're very strong. This time around, you've killed the divine emperor, and it's enough for you to complete the mission. Next, as long as they rescued the humans on this planet and guided them to cultivate martial arts, they would be able to set history back on track. I control the Qiu Dao alliance and am willing to take charge of the work from now on. I will definitely..." Bang! With a light flick of Feng Xingjian's finger, a stream of all-conquering sword intent shot out. Qiu Dao let out a furious bellow, and streams of netherworld dead river appeared before him. Layers of stacking martial will burst out explosively, and 3 divine remains equipment also shot out simultaneously, turning into 3 barriers before him. However, even though he had gone all out to defend, it was meaningless before Feng Xingjian's explosive martial will of 5,200 points. The netherworld dead river was split into 2. The 3 divine remains equipment exploded, and his martial will was slashed apart. Qiu Dao looked at the all-conquering sword intent that seemed to have entered an unstoppable state, and a hint of regret flashed in his eyes. At the next moment, he was slashed into dust and dissipated into the air. Concurrently, Wan Tong and Old Tian let out a surprise cry and were about to escape. The 2 of them moved at a speed akin to light speed and disappeared instantly. They could reach any corner of the earth within a second. If ordinary experts were to deal with them, even if they were stronger than them, they would still need to spend quite a lot of effort to pursue and escape. However, Feng Xingjian's illusory arts had reached such a level. Moreover, when he had killed Qiu Dao with a single sword attack earlier, he had also mixed in a powerful threat. It made it impossible for others to find the source of danger from the sudden inspiration senses. It was because there were dangers everywhere. Therefore, the 2 of them had just moved when 2 streams of silver longswords pierced into their bodies. One was the Thunder Calamity, while the other was the Panway sword. After a series of attacks, their conjured physiques shattered. Then, with a flash of sword light, all of their martial wills were wiped out. Seeing that the three divine-level experts had been wiped out in an instant, everyone present was as quiet as cicadas in winter. Feng Xingjian looked at the Snake King and the other divine-level experts and instructed calmly. The Divine Emperor has been wiped out. What we need to do next is to save humans, restore civilization, and guide them to cultivate martial arts and absorb ether particles. I'll leave this matter to you guys. The Snake King stood up, cupped his fists, and said respectfully, "Don't worry. With the four of us taking action personally and the Qiu Alliance's influence, it'll take at most half a month to complete this." Feng Xingjian nodded. There was no need for him to get busy with these matters. He could make use of this period of time to cultivate and also send out clones to explore this world. At the next moment, his body retreated from the complete form of the heaven-connecting upper extremity sword physique. Then he took a step forward and moved at a speed akin to light speed, arriving at the original location of the underground base. The high-tech base, which had been like a beehive, had completely disappeared due to the battle between Feng Xingjian and the Divine Emperor. All that was left was a pitch-black crater. Feng Xingjian had come here to look for the cube that the Divine Emperor had left behind. He had thought that the reason the Divine Emperor was able to possess so much high-tech technology and even fend off the Qiu Alliance's attacks was because he was the owner of a system and had some sort of system that allowed him to exchange for high-tech technology. It was just like in the previous world that Feng Xingjian had stayed in. Due to the influence of ether particles, many humans possessed various other systems that were similar to the Night system. However, by the looks of it, the Divine Emperor did not possess a system. The power of his physical body originated from a cultivation method that was different from night martial arts. It should be the cultivation path of a certain race in the multivariate universe. His technology came from the cube that he had used earlier. In the short period of time that this cube had appeared, it had taken over the entire planet's network, instantly wiping out all of the consciousness that the Divine Emperor had uploaded. Feng Xingjian arrived before the cube and saw that this palm-sized silver cube was floating quietly in midair. It seemed as if it was not affected by the battle between Feng Xingjian and the Divine Emperor at all. Feng Xingjian's gaze swept across the surface of the cube. With a single thought, his martial will probed toward the cube. Feng Xingjian was extremely curious about this item that could bestow the Divine Emperor with so many robot armies. However, as his martial will came into contact with the cube, the entire cube swayed abruptly. It became increasingly transparent and started to disappear. Feng Xingjian's gaze narrowed, and he put out a palm that seemed to contain the most terrifying power in the world. The space in his palm kept on distorting as if it was nurturing an entire world. Chapter 897. Under the envelopment of Feng Xingjian's palm, the space where the cube was located started to change. The phenomenon of gradually becoming transparent and disappearing started to reverse. This was Feng Xingjian interrupting the cube's spatial teleportation. Although he was unable to do something like spatial teleportation, he was able to stop the cube from doing so by distorting space. However, at the next moment, the cube trembled slightly and instantly broke free from the effects of the distorted space, disappearing in an instant. Feng Xingjian could clearly sense that the cube's earlier attack had come into contact with the profoundness of space-time, surpassing the microscopic realm. It was a victory in terms of knowledge and realm, and Feng Xingjian was unable to stop it. Feng Xingjian sighed inwardly. It seems that my realm is still insufficient in the multivariate universe. After this cube disappeared, it probably went to the Divine Emperor's influence. Feng Xingjian recalled what the Divine Emperor had said earlier. The Divine Emperor had claimed that his mother had come from a supreme race in the multivariate universe. Regardless of how much of what he had said was true or false, from the cube, high technology, and the Divine Emperor's display of strength, it was very likely that the influence he had mentioned had the ability to traverse parallel worlds. Now that he had killed the Divine Emperor and the cube had disappeared without a trace, it meant that he would have to be careful of the other party's possible revenge. 5 days later, 99% of Feng Xingjian's powers had gone to this world Sunday. He kept on tempering his martial will with the thunder-inducing technique. Of course, he would not waste a single minute or second to cultivate. The remaining powers turned into a clone and walked on the surface of the moon. However, he had walked around almost the entire moon, both inside and outside, but he did not find the thing he had imagined. What he was looking for was naturally the moon's relics that he had encountered in the previous few worlds. It could be said that he would be able to gain great benefits each time he went to the moon's relics. They usually contained a lot of knowledge regarding the physical world, which could help him raise his realm and battle prowess. However, after walking on the moon today, Feng Xingjian discovered that there were no traces of relics left on the surface of this world's moon. It seems that not every world will have moon's relics. If that's the case, then the person or influence that left behind this relic isn't as strong as I originally estimated. Feng Xingjian's doppelganger moved slightly and left the moon, returning to Earth. Right now, on Earth, 4 streams of light traversed across the horizon. They were the 4 divine-level experts with the Snake King in the lead. Their martial wills were scattered in the sky, occasionally cutting across the sky like meteors, sweeping up several hundred or even 1,000 humans as they returned to the Qiu Dao Alliance's territory. There were also some remnant mechanical armies that were resisting the attacks of the 4 experts. However, without the Divine Emperor's control and the support of the cubes, it was only a matter of time before they were wiped out. Feng Xingjian swept his gaze across the area. In a flash, he arrived at a city. Purple Star and one of the Snake King's clones were already waiting here. At the sight of Feng Xingjian's appearance, the Snake King took a step forward and said, "Sir, the immigration work and the opening of martial arts dojos in various places are already in the process. Even if we were to leave after this, I'm afraid that the history of this world will already follow the development of martial arts. This morning, I could already feel a trace of my original world's calling. I'm afraid it won't be long before we leave this world." The Snake King had been the proudest out of the 6 heavenly generals. He had not been completely convinced even by Qiu Dao in the past. However, before Feng Xingjian, he did not have any temper at all. He merely sighed slightly as he spoke. After all, everyone had witnessed Feng Xingjian's strength. Moreover, the Snake King had stayed in this world for so many years. Now that he was about to return to his original world, he would naturally feel a little emotional. Feng Xingjian nodded. Earlier today, he had also sensed some kind of calling that transcended space-time. He knew that it was the 9 heavens' response to him. As he spoke, Zixing tapped out a finger, and a stream of light floated out from her fingertip, shooting toward Feng Xingjian's forehead. Feng Xingjian received it and scanned it with his martial will. He could sense that there was a lot of knowledge contained in it. Zixing said, "This is the technological information that we've gathered from the system left behind by the Divine Emperor. We followed your instructions and didn't miss out on anything." Feng Xingjian's martial will was already immersed in this knowledge. The Divine Emperor's technology was not created by him, but came from the cube. However, if he wanted to create all sorts of high technological weapons and mechanical weapons, he would naturally need information and programs. Feng Xingjian's goal was to obtain these information. They were like nutrients that could help Feng Xingjian's martial arts improve further in a microscopic realm. After scanning through it slightly, Feng Xingjian stored all the information into his mind and stored it away for future observation. Zixing and the Snake King exchanged a glance. In the end, the Snake King said, "Sir, if it wasn't because of you, we'd probably have become the Divine Emperor's dead souls or slaves. You saved our lives and helped us to break through this trial. In order to thank you, we would like to provide you with a piece of information." "Oh, what information?" The Snake King smiled. "Actually, Zixing and I came from the same world." Feng Xingjian's gaze narrowed slightly, and he asked curiously, "Could it be that the 2 of you cleared the trial together?" The Snake King nodded and said, "That's right. In our world, there's a method for 2 people to clear the 9-tiered heavens together. This can greatly increase the success rate of clearing the trial. Zixing and I came from the same world. However, you should also know that once others find out about this method, they'll inevitably have some thoughts. Therefore, we've been pretending to be from different worlds and that we're not on good terms with each other. Hearing that there was a world that had invented such a method, Fang Xingjian was immediately tempted. It was as the Snake King had said. This method did greatly increase the success rate of clearing the trial. Moreover, Fang Xingjian was not the only one who could use it. Even his subordinates could use it. The fourth prince, Prince Philip, and Tyrant could all use this method to increase the success rate of clearing the trial. Fang Xingjian took a serious look at the two of them. For them to be able to divulge such a top secret meant that they were truly grateful to him. I'd like to hear the details. Therefore, the Snake King and Zixing imparted this method known as the double moon's projection to Fang Xingjian. This was a method that could allow two knights of the same level to enter the nine-tiered heavens together and arrive in the same world. Fang Xingjian had already made up his mind to impart this method to the divine-level experts under him the moment he returned. With the mystical prince and the double moon's projection method, it would be sufficient for Tyrant and the others to improve rapidly. In the future, if he were to fight against the guardian kings from the Holy Sea of Truth, he would not need to fight them alone. Chapter 898. 3 days later, several 100 million people had gathered in East Asia, and several hundred safety zones were spread out across this land. Countless martial arts schools have been set up, and all sorts of martial arts cultivation methods have been printed into books for everyone to read. All sorts of dangerous creatures in the wilderness have been cleared up by the divine-level experts. Lu Ying, Little Tanuki, and the other disciples of the divine-level experts were given the Seven Saints' Great Golden Pagoda to help them suppress the entire world. The four divine-level experts then set up many layers of formations and left behind a few backup plans. Everyone felt a strong sense of summoning. Under the arrangements of the four divine-level experts, at least before Little Tanuki and the others died, the trajectory of the entire society would probably operate according to the plans of the Snake King and the others. History had been changed, and this stage could be considered to have been cleared. Although the first knight had yet to be born, Zixing, the Snake King, and the others had all left after sensing the summoning force from the nine-tiered heavens in this world. Fang Xingjian continued to stay in this world. He could sense an intense summoning force from a place that transcended space-time. It was as if he would be able to leave this world and return to Miracle World with just a slight leap of his body. In the past, he had experienced a similar feeling when he cleared the fuse stages. However, it was just a fleeting feeling, and he was immediately transported back to his original world. It was only when he cleared the previous stage that his strength had increased tremendously, and he could faintly sense the existence of the timelines in the endless universe. This time around, it was clear that Fang Xingjian was even stronger. Not only could he sense the summoning force that transcended space-time, but he could also temporarily reject it and stay in this world. The reason he wanted to stay in this world was because he discovered that as the humans on this planet started to cultivate and engulf ether particles, all sorts of systems gradually appeared on their bodies. Of course, they were not all-night systems right from the start. Instead, they were like the previous world that Fang Xingjian had been to, possessing all sorts of extraordinary powers. Fang Xingjian's clone turned into a stream of sword light and flew across the sky, arriving in a safety zone. With a light sweep of his martial will, he scanned through the small safety zone, which was several 10,000 square meters in size, within the hill below. At the next moment, several sword lights that were hard to see with the naked eye slashed down, and wisps of black gas surged up. Fang Xingjian opened his mouth and swallowed them. Similar scenes continued to play out in the sky above the continent. Fang Xingjian continued to slice off one system after another and swallowed them into his body. He saw that the progress on his interface was also continuously increasing. Almost every time he killed 100 people, he would be able to increase his progress by 1%. Compared to killing the knights in Miracle World, his efficiency was much higher. Meanwhile, The clone that Feng Xingjian had left behind in Litian City was sitting cross-legged. He was still pondering over the twin moons projection technique that Zi Xing and the Snake King had passed down to him. This secret art requires both parties to be at the same level and trust each other. This is a rather simple condition. The crux of the matter is who I should choose to strive for level 6 of the divine level with me. Without reaching tier 6 of the divine level and stepping into the transmogrification realm and possessing the great spatial translocation ability, they would not be considered to possess decisive power in the upcoming calamity. Therefore, although Feng Xingjian had just cleared the trial for tier 5 of the divine level, he had already started considering the matter of striving for tier 6 of the divine level. After another 5 days, Feng Xingjian sensed that the suction force coming from his body was getting increasingly stronger. He knew that he could no longer drag things on. Letting out a soft sigh, he looked at his stats window. The progress had already reached 11%. Although the efficiency of slashing systems in this world was very high, the time was too short after all, and the number of people who were not knights were still too few. With a sigh, Feng Xingjian's figure dissipated completely, leaving this world. At the next moment, Feng Xingjian felt as if his entire body had been distorted into a state that was hard to describe with words. At this moment, he seemed to have surpassed space and time, reaching a state where there was no concept of time and space. The past, present, and future kept on flashing before him. It was as if he had traversed countless universes, yet it was also as if he had not moved at all. The long river of history flowed past rapidly before his eyes. By the time he reacted, he had once again appeared in the 9-tiered heavens. Feng Xingjian looked thoughtfully at the endless land under his feet, and a hint of wisdom flashed in his eyes. In the process of returning to this world, Feng Xingjian's perception of space-time deepened once again, and he had truly stepped into tier 5 of the divine level. His martial will scanned across space, and the layers of space that had been stacked together had now turned into many unbelievably tiny fragments in his eyes. At this moment, a comprehension surged in Feng Xingjian's heart. He understood that these fragments were the smallest units in space. Using his martial will to slightly change these fragments, Feng Xingjian discovered that his ability to distort space was over 10 times stronger than before. At tier 5 of the divine level, one's understanding of space was extremely deep. Their ability to distort, compress, and stretch space had reached a limit. It was just like when Alexander performed this ability in the past. Before Feng Xingjian had reached the microscopic level of the infiltrating void sword, none of his attacks had been able to hit Alexander. After using this ability, he would even be able to open up a divine country and form a small world. At this stage, even if he had not reached the microscopic level previously, he would have reached the microscopic level of control over spatial distortions. Moreover, once he had reached the microscopic level to begin with, such control would be like a fish in water. Right now, when Feng Xingjian truly stepped into tier 5 of the divine level, he immediately sensed the benefits. It was as if he had immediately obtained a lot of knowledge regarding spatial structures at the microscopic level. This was something that he had not obtained from the moon's relics and the divine emperor's knowledge. Right now, when his martial will scanned his conjured physique, he immediately sensed the existence of many flaws. This was a kind of flaw in space. Many fragments of space existed in his body. It was these fragments and fragments of space that formed the basic unit of space. It seemed to be the smallest unit of space, which also caused his physical body to have a slight flaw. The grasp of space and the recognition of the existence of the smallest unit of space were the limits of the microscopic level. Space was not a single entity, but was formed from countless fragments. Feng Xingjian knew this when he used the infiltrating void sword to traverse spatial gaps. However, it was still Feng Xingjian's first time seeing the smallest spatial unit that formed space. This ability allowed a tier 5 divine level expert to have an unparalleled advantage when it came to controlling space. If it was not because he had reached tier 5 of the divine level and had a deeper understanding of space, It would have been hard for Feng Xingjian to discover these existences even with his microscopic level. Chapter 899. With Feng Xingjian's current martial will and sword arts, he had already reached the microscopic level in his sword arts to begin with. Therefore, if he were to simply use the means of distorting space, he would not be able to match up to his original battle prowess. However, if he were to use it to supplement his sword arts, he would be able to increase his battle prowess. However, he would still need time to integrate these changes into his sword arts. Right now, after Feng Xingjian saw the smallest units in these pieces of space, he felt that his body was in a fragmented state. Each part of his body existed in countless tiny pieces of space, as if he was being dismembered by space at every moment. This was a distortion that only experts who had cleared Tier 5 of the divine level would be able to sense. However, it was easy to deal with this now that he knew about it. Feng Xingjian inhaled slightly, and in an instant, the light rays, electromagnetic waves, magnetic forces, and countless astral rays within a range of 1,000 lis started to seethe intensely. Endless powers were engulfed into Feng Xingjian's body, and Feng Xingjian's conjured physique had a feeling of fullness. Immediately after, his body contracted abruptly, as if turning into a black spot that was hard to see with the naked eye. His entire body was shrunk into the smallest unit of space. This stretch of space was then enlarged and stretched, and Feng Xingjian's entire body once again returned to its original size. Right now, his conjured physique existed in a complete stretch of space, in the smallest unit of spatial fragments. The spatial fragments were then stretched and enlarged. Right now, there were no longer any spatial gaps inside or outside of his body. A feeling of perfection suddenly rose in Feng Xingjian's heart. He reacted at this moment. This is probably the first time since I was born that my entire body is in a complete stretch of space, truly becoming one. Right now, as long as Feng Xingjian was willing to, he would be able to allow his conjured physique to be in a complete state at all times. Regardless of whether it was his explosive powers, his conjured physique's defenses, or the circulation of his martial will, they were all 30% stronger than before. He lowered his head and looked at his stats window. It had become, name Feng Xingjian, age 20, occupation eternal sword senior level, 34 strength, 826 agility, 824 reaction, 729 endurance, 710 flexibility, 709 martial will, 502 techniques. Sword power, level 50, celestial eradication, sword formation. Level 50 celestial eradication, sword technique. After stepping into Tier 5 of the divine level and reaching level 34, his strength increased once again. Not only did his martial will increase tremendously, breaking through to an unprecedented 5,500 points, but his conjured physique's strength, agility, and other attributes had also increased by 100 points under the Eternal Sword Senior job. Once Feng Xingjian used his martial will to propel his conjured physique, his attributes and martial will would erupt concurrently, and the effects of such an increase would be even more terrifying. After checking the changes he had undergone after reaching Tier 5 of the divine level, a contemplative expression flashed on Feng Xingjian's face. Without a doubt, after reaching Tier 5 of the divine level, his understanding toward space would be extremely deep, and the increase in his battle prowess would not be great. The crux was that there would definitely be many new changes in his cultivation. For example, he had opened up his god nation. Now he had perfected his conjured body. These changes in his cultivation had increased his battle prowess. After I go back, I can take this as a reference for the ancient path of hell and the Mage Association's cultivation methods for Tier 5 of the divine level. At the thought of this, Feng Xingjian's body moved slightly, and 90% of his powers darted forth, heading toward the Earth's sun to continue cultivating. The remaining 10% of his powers returned to the sky above the imperial capital, planning to research the cultivation methods for Tier 5 of the divine level. At the same time, he imparted the double moon's projection to strengthen Tyrant and the others. Simultaneously, in the Empire's eastern sand region, in an oasis, in a large manor that was originally called the Four Seasons Villa, killing cries were shaking the skies. Flames were burning everywhere, and ether particles were seething everywhere. Over 10 conferred knights wearing scarlet capes darted back and forth, wantonly massacring the resistors in the villa. A man covered in blood half knelt on the ground. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he was shedding tears of blood. "Traitor, you destroyed our Four Seasons Villa's 100-year legacy. You'll die a horrible death." In midair, the corners of Tyron's lips curled up into a hint of a brutal smile. Stepping on void space, he looked at the scene before him and said with an evil smile, "The Four Seasons Villa has disobeyed the Emperor's orders, invaded our land, harbored criminals, and even dared to attack the Empire's officials. If I don't kill all of you, others will think that I'm made of mud." Right now, Tyron was in charge of over 1,000 conferred knights in the Empire. He had set up the Empire's military execution order and was in charge of managing the various martial arts factions in the world. As the headquarters was located at the Empire's East Gate, it was also known as the East Military Execution Order. Although the East Military Execution Order's authority overlapped with the Knight Association's, due to Tyron's existence, its prowess far surpassed that of the original Knight Association. Recently, it had been restraining and taking in all the factions in the world, and it had also established an impressive reputation. Hearing Tyron's words, the man bellowed, "Our Four Seasons Villa stands aloof from worldly affairs and has not participated in the world's battles for over 100 years. Those who joined the villa are all pitiful people who are sincere in repentance and are no longer willing to continue with the killings in the martial arts world. As for the land, it was all donated by the disciples. What has it got to do with the Empire? You demons have killed several hundred people from our villa. You'll have retribution." "Ha ha!" Hearing this, Tyron laughed out loud, and a hint of red flashed on his pale face. "There's really nothing much to say to an idiot like you. You've really become a fool after spending all your time cultivating." Feng Xingjian opened his mouth and swallowed the upper half of the man's body, leaving the lower half of the man's body on the ground, forming a pool of blood. Wiping away the fresh blood at the corner of his lips, Tyron's lips twitched. "It's really disgusting." Holt, who was at the side, was not surprised by this scene. Ever since he had joined the East Military Execution Order, due to his outstanding performance, he had been fighting alongside Tyron, wiping out various factions that were unwilling to disband and submit to him, as well as martial arts influences that had committed illegal acts. "Sir, why do you only eat half of it each time?" Tyron threw a glance at Holt as if he was looking at a fool, let out a cold snort, and said, "The lower half is full of sh*tea. Are you going to eat it?" Simultaneously, the massacre in the entire villa was nearing its end. All the young and strong people who had resisted were all massacred. Tyron instructed calmly, "Compile all the martial arts manuals into books and send them back to the imperial capital to offer them to the imperial preceptor. Leave half of the remaining heavenly and earthly treasures, divine weapons, and armor. Register the rest and hand them over to the national treasury." Over 10 conferred knights started to search the Four Seasons Villa excitedly. They really wished that there would be more factions that were unwilling to disband and submit to him, cutting off their legacies. Over 10 leagues away from the villa, a young man's eyes were wide open as he stared at the flames and thick smoke in the distance. His eyes were filled with hot tears, and he clenched his teeth so hard that hints of blood flowed down. The legacy of 100 years has been lost in a single day. The young man's fists were clenched so tightly that they turned pale, and his eyes seemed to be spewing out flames. He dropped to his knees abruptly and said with a pained expression, "I'm a sinner. I'm the sinner of the entire villa. This isn't your fault," a young lady next to him advised in a gentle voice. Next to him, a young lady persuaded in a gentle voice, "Brother, that demon Feng Xingjian is holding the prince hostage to take control of the empire. He has 6 divine level experts under him. His cultivation is also unfathomable. He has defeated over 10 divine level experts consecutively, defeated the plains' heavenly Lion King, and enslaved the entire plains and desert single-handedly. His prowess is overwhelming, and there's probably no one in the entire world who can stop him other than the Holy Sea of Truth. Even a myriad stars palace and the full moon shrine have been disbanded. There's no way for us to go up against them. She looked at her elder brother worriedly, as if worried that he would go and seek revenge against Feng Xingjian. Our world isn't the only one in this world. The young man lifted his head abruptly and said with great hatred, "Tyrant, Feng Xingjian, you guys wiped out my Four Seasons villa. If I don't take revenge for this, how will I, Duan Tianhao, be able to face my ancestors?" A valley, an old man, and a series of secrets appeared in his mind. At the thought of this, a hint of determination flashed in his eyes. He brought the young lady with him and left the Four Seasons villa without even turning back. He passed through deserts, traversed over mountains, evaded the Empire's search, and finally arrived at a valley. He had just arrived at the entrance of the valley when he felt a gush of eerie and cold aura gushing toward him. Simultaneously, an aged voice rang out in his mind. "Oh, you're brimming with pernicious aura, and it's hard to quell your hatred. It seems that you have a great vengeance to exact. So you've thought it through." Chapter 900. Hearing this elderly voice, Duan Tianhao raised his brows, and a hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes. However, when he thought of how the Four Seasons villa had been destroyed, how countless friends and relatives had collapsed in pools of blood, and how Tyron's face appeared in his mind, intense hatred filled his eyes, and he walked in without any hesitation. Duan Tianhao's younger sister, Duan Zian, asked worriedly, "Brother, where is this place? Who is the person who spoke earlier?" Duan Tianhao said coldly, "It's someone who can help us kill Tyrant and Feng Xingjian, and help our Four Seasons villa take revenge." "Brother, can you not be like this?" Duan Zian cried and said, "That Feng Xingjian is like the sun in the sky right now, dominating the entire southern region. He's unstoppable. If you die, our Duan clan will have no more descendants. How will we be able to face Mom and Dad after we die? No one is invincible. Even the Pope and Mage Kings have failed, let alone a mere Feng Xingjian." After saying that, Duan Tianhao stepped into the valley without even turning back. Seeing this, Duan Zian sighed and followed after him. The moment the two of them entered the valley, they could see birds chirping and flowers fragrant. There were flowing streams, blue skies, and white clouds. There were even cows and sheep running around. It was like a paradise on earth. The two of them strolled in the valley, and a faint fragrance of fragrant grass wafted to their noses. Even their nervous and furious emotions were alleviated a lot. When Duan Tianhao reached the bottom of the valley, he saw a thatched hut there. There were several acres of farmland around it, and a few chickens were reared there. It was like a rural life. At the same time, an old priest sat on a stone platform in the courtyard, looking at the chessboard on the stone platform in silence. This was an old man with a fat head and big ears, and his entire body was made up of fat. His white and tender fat would tremble occasionally as he moved, as if oil would flow out with a casual poke. He wore a white priest robe, and his hair was tied up into a bun, giving off a strange feeling. Seeing the two of them appear, the chubby old man revealed a grin. The fat on his face trembled as he looked at Duan Tianhao and said, "You are right. There is no one in this world who is invincible." As he spoke, he stood up and circled around Duan Tianhao and Duan Zian. Hints of surprise kept on flashing in his eyes, causing Duan Zian to feel a strong sense of unease. The fat Taoist smiled and stopped his observation. He asked, "The Tyrant and Feng Xingjian you were talking about, are they your enemies?" "Not bad. I want revenge." Duan Tianhao looked straight at the fat Taoist and said, "You said it before. As long as I'm willing, you can give me the strongest power in the world, allowing me to kill anyone I want to kill." A strange smile appeared on the fat Taoist's face. He said softly, "Of course." However, Duan Zian, who was at the side, felt that something was amiss. There seemed to be a faint stench coming from her nose. She shouted loudly, "Brother, don't listen to his lies. Feng Xingjian is able to defeat a Tier 5 Divine level expert and kill over 10 Divine level experts single-handedly. Even the Tier 6 Divine level corpse that the Heavenly Lion King controlled was defeated by him. In the entire world, the only people who can defeat Feng Xingjian are probably the few Guardian Kings and Saints from the Holy Sea of Truth, as well as some Mage Kings from the Mage Association. This fatso is an unknown person. How can he possibly help you take revenge? Brother, don't be fooled by him." Duan Tianhao did not say anything and just glared at the fat Taoist. The fat Taoist chuckled and said, "He's just at Tier 5 of the Divine level. It's true that he's already a formidable character in this world of yours, but he's nothing much in other places. Those below Tier 6 of the Divine level are just ants. If I were to recover my full cultivation, killing that Feng Xingjian would be as easy as killing a chicken." Duan Zian laughed angrily and said, "Then may I ask what realm you're at, senior?" The fat Taoist let out a soft sigh and said, "I was originally a priest from the mountains in the Western Land. 1,000 years ago, I was sealed here. Before I was sealed, my cultivation was about at Tier 6 of the Divine level." Hearing this, Duan Zian frowned. This mysterious land had always been in the Empire's records. It was said that many people and clans in the Empire, such as their Duan clan, had migrated over from the Western Land in the past. However, in their generation, they had almost no understanding of the Western Land at all. Most of the Western Land's migrants did not even have much understanding of their ancestors and homeland. It was very rare for people like the Eastern Sand region's Wang clan to know that they came from the Mountain Assit dynasty and knew some of the dynasty's royal family's cultivation methods. In fact, the Western Land was even more mysterious than everyone had imagined. There had once been divine-level experts who had tried to search for this mysterious land. They had traversed the endless oceans, but they had not been able to find it. It was as if this land did not belong to this world. However, Duan Zian reacted very quickly and said with a sneer, "Above Tier 1 of the Divine level, one can only attain a breakthrough after the world's metamorphosis and the 9-tiered heavens are formed. You were at Tier 6 of the Divine level previously? In that case, you've been alive since the previous onslaught? Based on what I know, the 6th onslaught happened 1,000 years ago. You've been alive for so long." Looking at Duan Tianhao's puzzled gaze, the fat priest chuckled and said, "What's so difficult about a method to prolong one's lifespan? In your land, no matter how strong a divine-level expert is, they'll still die within 200 to 300 years. Even Tier 9 divine-level experts will only have a lifespan of 300 years. However, the Western Land has long since created a method to convert strength and lifespan. It allows one to keep on depleting one's own strength to maintain one's lifespan. As long as one's strength is inexhaustible, one's lifespan will not be depleted. In the Western Land, no matter how mortals cultivate, they will still be mortals. No matter how strong they are, their lifespan will still be limited. They'll go back and forth in the secular world, but they'll never be able to reach the threshold of our immortal sections." At this point, the fat Taoist priest smiled. Hearing the fat priest reply, it was as if the history of a group of divine-level experts who were always high and mighty, looking down on the mortal world, had appeared before Duan Zian. A hint of surprise and doubt appeared on her face. Clearly, she did not really believe the fat priest's reply. Duan Zian said, "How can there be such a thing? If there really is a method to convert lifespan and strength, then how could they not have discovered such a method? There are over 10,000 years of martial arts legacies in this land, and there are also great geniuses like the Divine Sun Emperor, the Mystic Abyss Heavenly Emperor, and Saint Adam." Hearing that, the fat priest smiled, causing Duan Zian to feel uneasy. Even her body started to tense up. "How do you know that they didn't discover it?" The fat priest let out a cold snort and said, "I also found it strange in the beginning, but as time passed, I understood. After a group of people in the Western Land discovered this method to extend longevity, they called themselves immortals and established immortal sections. They forbade immortals and mortals from interacting with each other and strictly controlled the number of immortals. There were also a few eternal emperors who used the power of the entire country, wanting to cultivate to prolong their lifespan and investigate the method to convert lifespan and strength. However, in the end, their country was destroyed. And in your land, there might be a single person who managed to do this. He hid silently behind history and killed everyone who coveted longevity. Chapter 901. The fat priest's smile was very cold, so cold that it was like the ice in the Arctic Ocean. The answer he had guessed caused Duan Xian's heart to shiver. Let's cut the crap. The fat priest put out his hand and beckoned. Let me ask you, do you want to seek revenge? Duan Tianhao nodded and said, my entire clan was wiped out, and I have an irreconcilable feud with them. Of course, I want to seek revenge. How can I possibly not want to? Duan Xian did not believe the fat priest's nonsense at all and wanted to persuade Duan Tianhao. However, Duan Tianhao did not listen to her at all. Duan Tianhao had unintentionally barged into an ancient tomb last year and discovered a secret inside. It recorded the matter of 7 experts from the eastern continent being defeated and sealed 1,000 years ago. Based on the records, he had come to this valley and discovered the fat priest. Under the fat priest's guidance, his martial arts had improved by leaps and bounds, and he had become a demigod. However, when the fat priest asked him to make an oath to impart unparalleled martial arts to him if he helped the 7 of them break the seals, he hesitated and chose to reject. According to the records in that ancient tomb, these 7 people were all great demons with great powers and unfathomable cultivation. In order to seal them, the Tulip dynasty had gone all out, including the 3 strongest people in the world, Saint Adam, formidable divine King Dante, and the Pope of the Holy See of Truth. It's been a great deal of effort to defeat these 7 people. There was no need to mention Saint Adam. He was the founder of the ancient path of hell, the first saint in 1,000 years, the ancestor of the empire's Krieg royal family, and one of the strongest experts in the world back then. He was also the main force in resisting the 6th onslaught. The formidable divine king was also a legendary character. Back then, he was the leader of the northern sacred land and one of the few factions recognized by the church. He had once injured Adam and made him leave behind 9 drops of his blood. As for the Pope of the Holy See of Truth, there was no need to mention him. Regardless of which generation of Pope the church was, they were all absolute top-notch experts in this world. It was only with 3 great experts, 3 great influences, and the Tulip dynasty, the strongest country in the world back then, that they had managed to suppress these 7 people with great difficulty. Despite this, these 7 people's cultivations were too high. Each of them had attained a breakthrough to Tier 6 of the divine level or above and possessed remarkable abilities. All of them had also grasped the profoundness of space and were able to shift space at will. Under such circumstances, although Adam, Dante, and the others defeated them, it was difficult for them to truly kill them. So they simply sealed them and suppressed them in 7 secret locations on the continent, waiting for them to slowly die of old age. In order to ensure that the later generations would not touch the 7 seals, almost all the information was wiped clean, waiting for the 7 people to slowly die of old age in the seals. However, there were 2 things that perhaps the person who placed the seal did not expect. But in the end, someone still leaked the news and left a record of what happened in the tomb. Secondly, after 1,000 years, the fat Taoist managed to accumulate a portion of his power under the seal, allowing a sliver of his will to burrow out and come to the valley on the surface. However, it was precisely because Duan Tianhao knew how dangerous these 7 people were that back then, no matter how the fat Taoist tried to tempt him with words, such as asking him to help him do something, asking him to cultivate the martial arts he provided, asking him to send a letter, asking him to accept the imparting of the Tao through the other party's divine. Well, Duan Tianhao did not agree to any of the requests. He only accepted the other party's guidance on the martial arts he cultivated. Thankfully, he discovered that the other party seemed to have really been sealed up. Other than normal communication, the other party was unable to perform any means on him. In fact, what he saw in front of him was just an illusion. However, right now, his clan had been wiped out, his parents had died horribly, and Duan Tianhao was burdened with a deep vengeance. How could he care so much? In order to seek revenge, he would not hesitate to destroy the world and bring about an overwhelming sea of blood. Seeing that Duan Tianhao agreed so directly, the fat Taoist laughed out loud. Good, good, good. Since that's the case, I'll impart you an unparalleled technique and give you a path that leads straight to the heavenly Tao. At the next moment, the fat Taoist pressed his palm down on Duan Tianhao's head, and countless pieces of information gushed out in his mind like a waterfall. Most of my powers have been sealed, and I'm unable to invade your consciousness. Calm your mind and focus. Don't resist. Hearing that, Duan Tianhao opened up his mind, allowing the other party's consciousness to enter his mind. At the side, Duan Xian said anxiously, "Brother, stop quickly. Don't be fooled by him." She waved her hand, wanting to push the fat Taoist away. However, upon contact, the other party passed through her like an illusion. He was not a real person at all. In Duan Tianhao's consciousness, streams of evil aura descended from the sky, spreading out toward his entire consciousness. Remember, the cultivation technique in our immortal sect is different from the knight martial arts of the secular dynasties. It's similar to the mages, but not the same. From today onward, you must completely forget the cultivation technique you used in the past. Everyone is born with a spirit. When the spirit gathers, it becomes a seed, and when the seed blooms, it becomes a root. Everyone has their own spirit root in their body. These spirit roots are separated into a total of 13 colors. Ordinary people tend to have 5 to 6 types of spirit roots. They are considered to have mixed colors, and their talent in cultivation isn't good. As for special geniuses, they would have dual or tricolored spirit roots. Only then would they be considered to have true talent in cultivation. As for those with single-colored spirit roots, they are 1 in 10,000. They are geniuses amongst geniuses. And you, Duan Tianhao, have a single pure-colored spirit root that is 1 in 10,000. Under the attention of countless pieces of information, Duan Tianhao felt his mind sinking. In the depths of his consciousness, a green seed was slowly germinating, turning into an extremely emerald spirit root. This is the foundation of your cultivation, your green spirit root. Looking at Duan Tianhao, who had sunk into cultivation, the fat Taoist could not help but laugh. Finally, 1,000 years, a whole 1,000 years, I can finally come out. Elsewhere, in the imperial capital's palace, Ferdinand closed his eyes and rested, basking in the sun. This aristocrat, who had gotten to know Feng Xingjian and cursed, had once helped Feng Xingjian earn money, swindle, steal, and publish books. As a knight who had been following Feng Xingjian, he had helped Feng Xingjian manage his businesses and accumulate wealth. After Feng Xingjian became the empire's imperial preceptor, he had also come to the imperial capital like many others in the Great Western region. He had now become the commander of the imperial capital's forbidden army. As an old subordinate of Feng Xingjian, not only had Ferdinand's authority reached the pinnacle, but his clan had also changed from a small aristocrat in curse to a great aristocrat with influence all over the Great Western region. They were in charge of over half of the empire's businesses in weapons, metals, and ores. They could be said to be one of the empire's new 4 great aristocrats, a rising noble in the imperial capital. His decision to follow Feng Xingjian closely back then was also seen as the most correct decision he had ever made in his life. Right now, the entire clan could be said to be supported by Feng Xingjian to the death. Right now, Ferdinand was looking at the carts of books before him, occasionally flipping through them and checking them. These were the martial arts secret manuals that Tyrant had collected from the various factions in the world. After these secret manuals were tabulated and recorded by Ferdinand, they would be sent to Feng Xingjian. Chapter 902. Ferdinand took a look and nodded, saying, "This batch of secret manuals from the Clear Spring Palace isn't bad." A young man smiled and said, "Brother, this Clear Spring Palace was one of the great sects in the Northwest in the past. It's said that divine-level experts have appeared in their ancestors before. They relied on their strong background and connections to disobey orders, unwilling to hand over the manuals and disband the sect. It said that their headquarters have shipped over 10 million gold coins out. How many resources do you think they've snatched?" Ferdinand nodded and said, "These local sects rely on their strong martial prowess to ignore the government and do whatever they want, turning the sects into small kingdoms. It's time to teach them a lesson." He looked at this cousin of his. Right now, Ferdinand's clan had become the empire's new nobility, and the clan's core members had also been placed in various important departments in the empire. This cousin of Ferdinand's was a cadre in the East Military Execution Order. However, Ferdinand knew that the other party would not come looking for him for a small matter, like escorting the secret manuals. He let out a light snort and asked, "What's the matter now?" Ferdinand's cousin, David, smiled and said, "There are a few younger sisters in my clan who have admired the imperial preceptor for a long time and wish to enter the palace to serve him. Brother, please help to make the arrangements." Ferdinand glared at him. Why would divine-level experts need maids to serve them? What they could do with a single thought was already enough for ordinary people to do for over 10 years. In the end, it was still because some people in his clan had not given up and wanted to use beauties. How many times have I told you guys that the imperial preceptor is focused on cultivation and doesn't lust for women? It's useless even if you guys give them to him. David merely smiled awkwardly. It's just a small token of our appreciation. Moreover, the younger sisters are all willing. It's fine even if it doesn't work out." Ferdinand shook his head and said, "Where are they? Let me take a look first." Outside the palace, a group of carriages was quietly parked there. There were over 10 young ladies waiting nervously in the carriages. These young ladies were young and beautiful. Some were petite and cute, while others were sexy and mature. Each of them had their own unique characteristics, and there were over 10 different types of beauties. These were all things that the Ferdinand clan had plundered during this period of time, wanting to offer to Feng Xingjian. The status of the entire Ferdinand clan was all thanks to Feng Xingjian. To them, Feng Xingjian was the clan's most important resource, their greatest backer. Under such circumstances, they would naturally think of ways to cozy up to this backer. A fairy-like girl with delicate skin and bright eyes stood out from the crowd. She did not speak to the girls beside her. She just hid in the corner and watched coldly as the girls around her discussed their futures. Some were guessing what kind of person Feng Xingjian would be, some were comforting each other nervously, and some were silent. No one knew what kind of thoughts were running through their minds. Looking at the scene in front of her, a trace of disdain flashed in the young girl's eyes. She was full of contempt for these women who try to sell their beauty in vain. As for her, of course, she would not sell herself for wealth and glory. The young girl's real name was Alice, and she was the daughter of the headmaster of the Thistle Academy, a private knight academy in the south. Unfortunately, as the Thistle Academy was unwilling to submit to the empire and severed its legacy, it was annihilated by Tyron's men. Alice ended up living in the secular world and made her way to the imperial capital. It was not easy for her to join this group, and she did so to get close to Feng Xingjian. I'm definitely not a match for that traitor in a head-on fight. The only chance is to make him fall for me. Alice had always been extremely confident in her looks. The men she had met before, no matter how strong their will and self-discipline were, would all be amazed by her looks. However, she was still nervous when it came to Feng Xingjian, whose name was known throughout the world and who was extremely ferocious. If I can get him to fall for me, everything will be easy. At the thought of this, a hint of determination flashed in Alice's eyes. She had already decided that even if she had to sacrifice everything, she would make Feng Xingjian fall for her. Just then, a voice rang out. The palace's doors opened, and the carriages slowly entered. The first thing they went through was a series of checks. Some matrons personally came up to them to check their bodies, and there were also layers of screening formations to check their ether particle density. Although the imperial capital had Fengxingjian and there was no need to worry about safety, the basic measures still had to be taken. They could not possibly trouble Fengxingjian for everything. After passing through many checkpoints, Alice finally saw a man by the name of Ferdinand. This was Fengxingjian's legendary lackey. He looked like a decent person, and Alice secretly assessed him. When she saw the hint of surprise hidden in Ferdinand's gaze when he glanced at her, Alice could not help but feel a hint of pride. Alice had always been rather confident in her looks. Ferdinand nodded, looked at his cousin, and said, "You guys are really thoughtful. This person might really have a chance. What's her name?" Hearing Ferdinand's judgment, David smiled. "She's called Angela, a female disciple of the Jade Water Palace. She's also second uncle's goddaughter." Over the next 3 days, Alice, or rather, Angela, was taught the relevant etiquette by the people in the palace. She was then arranged to stay in a side palace hall. This wait lasted for another 3 days. Just as she thought that she had been forgotten, she was finally summoned out. There were a total of 9 young ladies with her. Regardless of whether they were youthful, cute, sexy, or gentle, all of them put in their best efforts to dress up, wanting to show off their most beautiful side. The 10 young ladies were brought into another palace hall and waited there. In the pitch-black palace hall, everything seemed to be hidden in the shadows, making it hard to see what was in the depths of the palace hall. When the palace hall's bronze doors slowly closed with a creaking sound, the entire palace hall was encompassed by darkness. The 10 young ladies felt as if they had been swallowed by a monster. A feeling of terror rose in their hearts. Alice could not help but feel nervous as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Could it be that Fengxingjian is a pervert? What on earth is he trying to do? At the next moment, the darkness disappeared abruptly, and the 10 young ladies discovered that they had arrived in a stretch of desolate land. Countless sharp swords were stuck in their surroundings, densely packed together. Each of the long swords exuded strong sword intents, as if many experts were exuding their martial wills. On the high platform more than 100 meters away from them, a cold voice sounded in their hearts. "Pick up your swords and come to me." Chapter 903. These young ladies had been repeatedly instructed that they had to obey no matter what they were told to do. Now that they heard the orders in their minds, they did not hesitate at all. Each of them walked up to a sword and pulled it out. Alice also casually picked a sword and followed the others to the white-clothed figure. This was the first time the 10 young ladies had seen Fengxingjian's true appearance. Almost at the first moment she saw this face, Alice's mind was shaken. The other party's eyes, which were as bright as the starry sky, were like 2 black holes that firmly attracted all of her attention, as if they were going to suck her soul into them. To think that there's such a handsome man in this world. Alice forcefully suppressed the throbbing in her heart and lowered her head, not daring to look at Fengxingjian's face. Simultaneously, an explosive bellow rang out next to her. A lady dressed in green raised a heavy sword and slashed out toward Fengxingjian's head at lightning speed. Alice had been paying attention to this lady for a long time. She had a pair of long and beautiful legs and was extremely eye-catching among the 10 young ladies. She had not expected that she would explode with the power of a conferred knight. The heavy sword was like a stretch of mountain range, bringing along layers of stacking mountain shadows as it pressed out toward Fengxingjian. However, how could a power like this be able to harm Fengxingjian in the slightest? It was as if Fengxingjian had only taken a glance at her before the huge sword shattered and the mountain shadows dissipated. The lady dressed in green was like a cross that was fixed in midair, unable to move. As if knowing that she would definitely lose, the lady dressed in green cursed out loud when she realized that she was unable to move. "Traitor! You've kidnapped the prince and plotted to usurp the throne. You've harmed the loyal people. You'll die a horrible death." Fengxingjian threw a glance at her, and the corners of his lips curled up into a hint of a smile. This caused Alice's heart to tremble slightly once again, and even the faces of the other young ladies flushed red. Even the lady dressed in green, who was trapped, revealed a struggling expression. She immediately turned her head, not daring to look at Feng Xingjian. However, with a flash, Feng Xingjian appeared next to the lady dressed in green. He gently pinched her chin and said, "You don't look like this, right? Why don't you show your true colors?" The lady dressed in green revealed a hint of terror. "What on earth did you do? I don't want to. I don't want to listen to you." Although she said that, her body was undergoing a series of transformations. She had already turned from a long-legged mature woman into a cute girl with a flat chest and a height of 1.5 meters. Her eyes could not help but look toward Feng Xingjian. It was as if there was love seething in them, but there was endless terror in the depths of her eyes. In fact, her original intention was the same as Alice's. Both of them wanted to hide by Feng Xingjian's side. However, the moment she saw Feng Xingjian, she could not help but feel love gushing out from her heart. The feeling of love at first sight kept on seething. She knew that if she did not make a move, she might really to him, and would even betray the entire organization. She too. Feng matter what. Don't come near me, the young lady stuttered. However, Feng Xingjian smiled and gently brushed his fingers across her shoulder. The young lady let out a soft snort, feeling as if her entire body had gone limp. The young lady looked at Feng Xingjian with adoration, but tears kept flowing out from the corners of her eyes. "Kill me." Feng Xingjian merely smiled and looked at her. The young lady let out a stifled groan, and blood flowed out from her 7 apertures. She fainted. She severed her heart meridians and cranial nerves, attempting to commit suicide. However, she was stopped by Feng Xingjian at the final juncture, and she merely fainted. At the sight of this scene, Alice felt a chill run down her spine. She no longer dared to look at Feng Xingjian. She could only watch as the other 8 young ladies went up to Feng Xingjian while cheering. These young ladies were either hugging onto Feng Xingjian's thighs, arms, or chests. All of them stuck onto Feng Xingjian, constantly using their bodies to rub against Feng Xingjian. Blissful smiles appeared on their faces, as if they were on drugs. Their eyes were gradually filled with infatuation. Then, under Alice's astonished gaze, pieces of clothes slowly fell to the ground. Not long later, she heard moans that made her face and ears flush. In the sky, Feng Xingjian sat cross-legged. There was neither sorrow nor joy in his eyes, as if what was happening on the ground had nothing to do with him. Beside him, the realm-traversing guardian king looked down curiously. The 10 young ladies were standing there, not knowing what to do. Their faces were flushed red, and they would occasionally let out moans. The Imperial Preceptor has great skills. This method of bewitching people is probably a microscopic-level illusory art, right? Now that he had successfully cultivated the thunder-inducing technique and the heaven-connecting upper extremity sword physique, Feng Xingjian no longer cared if other people knew that he possessed the abilities of microscopic-level illusory arts. Feng Xingjian nodded and said calmly, "I've gained some insights after looking at Heartless City's amorous thousand threads sword technique." The realm-traversing guardian king naturally knew about Heartless City. It was merely a third-rate sect. This time around, they had not put up any resistance after being taken in by the Empire and had handed over all their secret manuals. The realm-traversing guardian king knew that this faction had some means of bewitching people and refining emotions. However, he definitely did not think that this was the source of Feng Xingjian's illusory art. After all, even with his realm, he could not help but have a good impression of Feng Xingjian as he looked at him. External manifestation of the heart sword. To think that this person's sword arts can affect my mind with every move he makes. He's really not simple. This was indeed the case. This was an illusory art that used illusory arts as its foundation and toyed with people's hearts and changed their emotions. It was a technique that Feng Xingjian had developed after reading countless manuals from different sects and combining them with the new microscopic-level knowledge he had obtained from the Divine Emperor in the previous world. Initially, when he was fighting against the evil God Tribe's warriors, he was already able to induce some terror. Now, he was able to take a step further and control the emotions of the weak. However, he was only able to affect the emotions of the weak. For existences like the realm traversing guardian king, the effect was negligible. Even Alice, who was on the surface, could barely overcome this influence. Despite this heart sword path could be considered to have reached a small success. As long as Feng Xingjian cultivated it in real time and tried to figure out people's hearts, he would continue to improve. As for the maids that he had just summoned, they were merely there to experiment with this heart sword Tao. The realm traversing guardian king smiled and said, "There seems to be a beauty down there who hasn't been hit by the Imperial Preceptor's heart sword. Her background is probably not simple. It's fine. I have my own arrangements." With a wave of Feng Xingjian's sleeves, layers of clouds came encompassing, covering up the entire land under his feet. "Guardian King, what do you think of my divine country?" The world that Feng Xingjian, the realm traversing guardian king, and the 10 young ladies on the ground had entered was the embryonic form of the divine country that Feng Xingjian had created during this period of time. The entire space was about 100 square kilometers. The sky above their heads was filled with a faint white light, and the sun and moon could not be seen. The land under their feet was flat and barren. There were no mountains, no water, and nothing else. This was something that Feng Xingjian had created by casually distorting and compressing a stretch of space and then filling it with some soil. Chapter 904. When the realm traversing guardian king heard Feng Xingjian's question, he understood that Feng Xingjian wanted to ask him about the church's cultivation methods in the divine kingdom. Imperial Preceptor. This divine kingdom was forged using a low technique. It could be used for storage, but it's useless in battle. Feng Xingjian asked, "Oh, since there are inferior methods, are there intermediate methods and superior methods?" The inferior method is to directly compress a space like the Imperial Preceptor's divine kingdom, like a storage device. Something that was within one's grasp and could be casually abandoned would not have any effect on trapping divine level experts of the same level. The law of the middle way is to set up layers of arrays within the God Kingdom. Not only is the God Kingdom sturdy, but can also drag the opponent into the God Kingdom and use the arrays to fight the enemy. Feng Xingjian nodded. Alexander and the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had done the same. They had set up layers of formations in their divine countries, turning them into a mobile fortress. However, once the opponent possessed the ability to traverse space, such as Feng Xingjian's infiltrating void or Tier 6 divine level experts spatial translocation, then such a divine country would not be of much use. The main factor was the power of the spirit design. Feng Xingjian planned to set up the fairy slaying sword formation in the God Kingdom. The realm traversing guardian king continued to say, "As for the superior technique, after the divine country is created, one will continuously nurture it with microscopic powers, changing its physical nature bit by bit, turning it into a small world that is different from the outside world. Even if we go in, we won't be able to come out easily." Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered slightly. This required him to constantly use microscopic powers to interfere with the microscopic world of the entire divine country, causing the laws of physics of the entire divine country to be different from the outside world. For example, he could use his own power to counteract all the gravity in the divine kingdom, causing the laws of physics inside and outside to be different. However, the more powerful the change, the more complicated and demanding it would be. After all, this was equivalent to using one's own power to replace the power of the world, interfering with the operation of the entire world in the divine kingdom. This was obviously extremely difficult. Regardless of whether it was the huge amount of energy required or the fact that the world operated by the new laws needed to be stable, it required the cultivator to have an extremely deep understanding of the world. Otherwise, it was very likely that his divine kingdom would collapse and all his previous efforts would be in vain. Once he succeeded, he would be able to obtain a world where the laws of physics were different from the outside world. Even if other refinement stage experts were to enter that world, they would most likely die. Feng Xingjian asked, I wonder if there's anyone in this world who can create a divine kingdom using the transcendence method. The realm-traversing guardian king shook his head. I've never heard of it in the current world. In fact, there are only two people in history who have managed to establish a divine kingdom with the transcendence technique. Oh, who is it? The realm-traversing guardian king replied. 1,500 years ago, the Tulip dynasty's founder, the Centauria Empress, and 1,000 years ago, the formidable divine king, who was Saint Adam's archenemy. Moreover, both of them had only stepped into the impeccable realm after reaching Tier 6 of the divine level, thus forming such a divine country. Feng Xingjian raised his brows, understanding how difficult it was. In the end, it was too difficult for someone at Tier 5 of the divine level to use their own powers to change the laws of physics in an area of space. Regardless of whether it was the requirement toward one's realm or power, it was too difficult for a Tier 5 divine level expert. This result was no different from the one he had gotten from the Black Mage King. After ascertaining this, Feng Xingjian did not plan on wasting too much time on it. He just combined his Eternal Sword Seigneur's Sword Realm ability, the Celestial Eradication Sword Formation, and the Divine Country. With that, it would mean that he would be able to maintain the Sword Formation at all times. When he wanted to activate it, he would just need to draw out the Divine Country directly. There would be no need for him to spend time setting it up. Moreover, with the three combined, there would be many wondrous effects in terms of spatial changes. The realm-traversing guardian king continued. Imperial Preceptor, the main reason why I'm here today is that the saint wishes to invite you for a meeting to discuss an important matter. Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered. When and where? 7 days later, Bi's region's Wolf's Roar Mountain. After setting a time to meet, the realm-traversing guardian king left with the third level of the mystical prince. With the transaction of the third level of the mystical prince, the imperial capital also received several 10 million gold worth of resources. With so many heavenly and earthly treasures from the church's collection, treasures that could increase attributes, raise specialties, strengthen the physical body, and strengthen the will, it was sufficient for Feng Xingjian's subordinates to get stronger once again. In the depths of the palace, a man with an unkempt beard and several tens of braids followed Ferdinand into the depths of the palace. Half a month ago, an envoy team had been sent from the plains. This man was the leader of the envoy team, Hu Jiaonan. Behind him were a few men from the plains who were also part of the envoy team. Right now, the plains were in a state of chaos due to the loss of the Heavenly Lion King and the 11 sacred generals. Countless tribe leaders rose up in revolt, plundering and fighting everywhere. As a result, the Plains King's court could only hole up in the capital. This time around, Hu Jiaonan had come to request for reinforcements. Having lost the suppression from the Heavenly Lion King and the 11 sacred generals, the entire plains were in a state of bloodshed. Moreover, the Empire's conferred knights had gone over to add fuel to the fire. Hu Jiaonan knew that Feng Xingjian's only female disciple, Lilia, had headed to the plains to hunt down and kill experts from the plains to train her martial arts. With Feng Xingjian's reputation, no one dared to seek revenge from Lilia, even after many experts from the tribes were killed. To the plains, this was an unprecedented humiliation. However, Hu Jiaonan knew that no matter how humiliating it was, he could only bear with it. This time around, he did not even dare to take the initiative to bring up Lilia's matter when he came to the capital. He looked at Ferdinand with a fawning expression and asked, "Sir Ferdinand, thank you for passing on the message this time around." With that, he gently stuffed a brocade box into Ferdinand's hands. Ferdinand received it without batting an eyelid, nodded, and said, "Thank you for your kind intentions." Seeing that the gift had been sent out, Hu Jiaonan appeared overjoyed. However, his heart felt as if it was bleeding. Right now, the king's court was no longer the same as before. In order to take over the empire, a large number of elite warriors had followed the 11 sacred generals and headed south. However, the outcome was clear now. None of the warriors from the plains who had headed south had managed to return to their hometown alive. The king's court had suffered a great blow, and many tribes had rebelled. The treasury was empty. It could be said that every gift that Hu Jianan had sent out was like having to swallow a broken tooth. This was especially so for Ferdinand. As someone from the palace, Hu Jianan was an important target for him to take down. The gifts that he had sent out over 1 million gold coins over the past few days. Yet Ferdinand had not expressed his stance at all. Hu Jianan kept on cursing the people from the empire for not doing what they were promised. Seeing that Ferdinand still did not say anything, Hu Jianan had no choice but to ask, "Sir, what does the imperial preceptor think of the plains?" He said, feeling aggrieved. Right now, the plains are in chaos, and the commoners are living a tough life. It's hard for the king's court to maintain itself, and it's not easy to get the resources that the empire provides. Chapter 905. Ferdinand's principle was to take all the benefits, but he would not make any promises. Hearing Hu Jianan's probing, he said calmly, "You'll know when you meet the imperial preceptor." Hu Jianan sighed, and the eyes of the few warriors from the plains behind him flashed with hints of fury. A few minutes later, the two of them arrived outside a side hall. When they opened the door, they saw a great fragrance of cosmetics coming from the courtyard. Several tens of beautiful young ladies were seated on the lawn in the courtyard. These girls were all natural beauties. Every single one of them was enough to charm countless males. Moreover, each of them was wearing different clothes. Some of them revealed their thighs, some revealed their collarbones, and some even showed off their voluptuous breasts. Almost every young lady was crazily exuding their sexiest and most charming side. The few envoys from the plains had never seen such a scene before. Almost all of them were staring at the young ladies and slashing them fiercely. They could not help but gulp down their saliva. Just then, a cold snort rang out from Ferdinand's throat. He lowered his head and said, "Watch your eyes. Don't look around." The few of them immediately came back to their senses and lowered their heads, not daring to look too much. However, they could not help but glance around, seeing fair and tender skin and brilliant eyes. Hu Jianan carefully threw a glance at the surroundings. His gaze moved very quickly as he forcefully shifted his gaze away from those beautiful young ladies. He took a glance at the entire courtyard and finally understood the situation before him. All the beautiful young ladies seemed to be seated in circles, and a black figure was sitting cross-legged in the center. The several tens of beautiful young ladies were all looking at that black figure in an infatuated manner. Their faces seemed to be filled with both sorrow and joy, revealing all sorts of complicated expressions. They were looking at the center in an infatuated manner, as if they had not even noticed the arrival of Ferdinand and the others. Hu Jianan thought it said that Fang Xingjian has been obsessed with women recently and has been plundering beauties to serve him. By the looks of it, it seems that this is true. At the thought of this, Hu Jianan's gaze lit up. "I'm not afraid that you like women. I'm just afraid that you don't like anything at all." He knew that the Heavenly Lion King's younger sister, Diu, who was the aunt of the Steel Lion Kingdom's new Khan, was in her 20s. She was also the top beauty in the plains and was known as the Pearl of the Plains. If we can get Diu to marry Fang Xingjian, the royal court's position will be unshakable. The current emperor of the empire, Charlot, is just a disciple of Fang Xingjian. If Diu marries Fang Xingjian, then His Majesty will be Fang Xingjian's nephew. Just as Hu Jianan's thoughts were running wild, the group of people had already walked to the center of the group of beautiful young ladies. The few of them had their heads lowered, and they could only see a long black robe dragging on the ground. Ferdinand said, "Imperial Preceptor, these are the envoys from the Plains of Grass. This is the leader of the team, Hu Jianan." In the next moment, an ethereal and dreamy voice rang out and entered their ears, giving them a feeling of endless yearning. "Raise your head, let me see." Hu Jianan raised his head and felt as if his head had exploded. What kind of person is that? Hu Jianan was almost unable to describe what the man he was looking at looked like. The other party's eyes, face, chest, and body. Every single part of the man was like the most magnificent gemstone in the world, exuding a soul-stirring glow. On the man's pale face was a pair of eyes that were like black pearls. The loose black robes draped over his body casually, revealing Feng Xingjian's chest. Hu Jiaonan's gaze stared at every inch of the man's body like a greedy dog staring at a piece of fatty meat. Each of Feng Xingjian's breaths and gaze deeply affected Hu Jiaonan's state of mind. It was as if each of Feng Xingjian's slight movements could control his emotions. The several tens of young ladies in the surroundings all wore crazed expressions. They looked greedily at the figure in the center, as if they were yearning to see every single inch of him. Behind Hu Jiaonan, the warriors from the plains who had fought bloody battles and even claimed to have the guts to attack Feng Xingjian were all kneeling on the ground, groveling at Feng Xingjian's feet like many obedient dogs try to please their master. Hu Jiaonan did his best to control his physical body and guard his mind, preventing himself from doing anything that was out of line. But to him, this was already his limit. Ferdinand lowered his head, not daring to lift his head to look at Feng Xingjian. Ever since Feng Xingjian's illusory arts had reached a higher level and he continued to derive this heart sword path while building his divine country, his heart sword would appear around him at almost all times. Any expert below the divine level would be unable to control their emotions when they saw him, and all their emotions would be controlled by him. Ferdinand had seen many people prostrating at Feng Xingjian's feet over the past few days. They were either filled with admiration, fear, or hatred. To think that Hu Jiaonan was still able to control his body made him slightly surprised. Just then, Feng Xingjian's ethereal voice once again rang out in everyone's hearts. Hu Jiaonan, why have you come to the Empire as a representative of the Steel Kingdom? Hu Jiaonan said with some difficulty. Imperial Preceptor, the plains are in a perilous situation right now. The various tribes are rebelling, and the Steel Kingdom's orders can't even leave the capital. The entire plains are in a state of misery and suffering, and the king hopes that the Empire can send people to provide assistance to the Steel Kingdom to wipe out the rebels and return peace to the plains. Feng Xingjian said calmly, "Then let the current Great Khan come to the imperial capital. If he acknowledges me as his father, I'll send Prince Philip up north to suppress the rebellion." Hearing this, Hu Jiaonan, who had felt that it was hard for him to control himself earlier, was now filled with fury. What a great humiliation it was for the Khan to acknowledge Feng Xingjian as his father. It was as if Feng Xingjian had stomped on the faces of all the tribes in the plains and even trampled on them fiercely. However, Hu Jiaonan was unable to refute the current situation. Just as Hu Jiaonan was hesitating, Feng Xingjian let out a sound. It was as if a bolt of heavenly thunder had rung up in Hu Jiaonan's mind, and a hint of great terror rose up in his heart. It was as if the world was going to be destroyed and the end of the world had arrived. The terror that penetrated deep into his bones caused him to break out in cold sweat, and his limbs to almost turn limp. This hint of terror was deeply rooted in his heart, causing him to be unable to say a single word when facing Feng Xingjian. I understand. I'll convey the Imperial Preceptor's intentions to the king." Seeing that Hu Jiaonan had left in a daze, Ferdinand said, "To think that these barbarians from the plains would have such a day. However, it's true that the plains are in a state of chaos now. If order isn't restored, it'll be very disadvantageous to the Empire when it comes to seizing the plains' resources." Ferdinand was naturally in favor of Feng Xingjian's wish to turn the Steel Lion Kingdom into the plains' spokesperson and puppet ruler. At the thought of the countless ferocious beasts, mineral resources, and large batches of slaves in the vast plains, Ferdinand could not help but feel excited. Feng Xingjian did not say anything. He merely asked, "Is there anything else?" Ferdinand handed over a letter and said, after some of the traitors had their sects wiped out, they managed to avoid being hunted down and joined forces to set up an organization called Country Restoration. Tyron feels that someone is adding fuel to the fire. Just kill them. There's no need to say so much. Ferdinand nodded and continued. Recently, there's a rumor that the treasures left behind by the Divine Sun Emperor are about to appear. There's a total of 7 portions of the treasures, which are located in 7 different corners of the world. It's said that many knights and conferred knights have been mobilized to search for these 7 locations. Chapter 906. Recently, there had been news of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures everywhere in the world. It was said that the Divine Sun Emperor's legacy was hidden within, and it had appeared in preparation for the 7th onslaught. The treasures were split into 7 parts, and all 7 treasure vaults contained the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. However, only one of them was real and contained the Divine Sun Emperor's legacy. Who was the Divine Sun Emperor? He was the first person to unify the entire world over 10,000 years ago. He led the entire world and gathered the resources of the world to fend off the 2nd onslaught. It was said that he had attained a breakthrough to Tier 9 of the divine level and was a legendary character who would not be interested in the treasures and legacies left behind by such a legendary character. Even if they knew that this news might be fake, no matter how rational a person was, they would find it hard to remain calm when faced with such temptation. Even the weakest person would not be able to help themselves from fantasizing after hearing this news. Perhaps they might have a fortuitous encounter and obtain the treasures. The entire world was stirred up. Even the news of the Empire's turmoil and Feng Xingjian's awe-inspiring actions in the southern region were suppressed. Even though they knew that the treasures might be fake, for the sake of that 1 in a million possibility, countless people started taking action. Right now, countless influences and cultivators across the entire world were all excited about the Divine Sun Emperor's 7 treasure vaults. The Empire's upper echelon had naturally received the news. Ferdinand said, "According to the rumors, one of the 7 treasure vaults is in the Empire, 1 is in the desert, 1 is in the plains, and the remaining 4 are all in the north. Have you sent people to investigate?" Feng Xingjian let out a cold snort and said, "It's clear that someone is adding fuel to the fire. If someone really knew about the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures, how could they possibly reveal them?" Ferdinand let out a bitter laugh and said, "It's a pity that it's hard for people to remain rational when faced with such temptation. The entire world is in a commotion, and countless people are searching for these 7 treasure vaults. We've also sent people to the Empire's treasure vaults in the desert and plains. However, most of them didn't manage to find them, and a small number of them have gone missing." "Oh," Feng Xingjian said in surprise, "gone missing? That's right. Those treasure vaults seem to be in another space. In the same area, some people can find them, while others can't," Ferdinand said with a frown. Ferdinand frowned and said, "Many of the people who were found have gone missing, but there are also people who have reappeared. These people have all lost their memories of being in there, but all of them have made great progress in their martial arts." Feng Xingjian smiled coldly. "If that's the case, then more people want to go in." "That's true," Ferdinand said. "Should we get Tyrant and the others to go in and take a look?" With Feng Xingjian's current status, it was naturally impossible for him to investigate such matters personally. Feng Xingjian was even unwilling to send divine-level experts to investigate. After all, in his opinion, there was a 99% chance that the news was fake. Besides, he already had another idea. While everyone was paying attention to the rumors about the Divine Sun Emperor's 7 treasure vaults, he could take the opportunity to do something. At the thought of this, he wondered if the person who had created this rumor also wanted to take the opportunity to attract everyone's attention to do something. What Feng Xingjian wanted to do was to get the divine-level experts under him to make use of the double moon's projection to clear the heavenly trials while everyone's attention was attracted. He wanted to do this in secret, allowing all of them to increase their strength greatly within a short period of time. Only then would he be able to leave with peace of mind and strive for Tier 6 of the divine level. Therefore, over the next few days, Tyrant, Prince Philip, the 4th Prince, Lan Yu, the Blue Sacred Moonlight, and the Astral Ancestor were all summoned to the imperial capital by Feng Xingjian. As for the other divine-level experts, such as the 1st Prince who was placed under house arrest, the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch who was sent to exploit the desert, and Prince Suoshian who was temporarily recovering in the imperial capital, 99% of his powers had been wiped out by Feng Xingjian, and he had yet to fully recover even now. Otherwise, with him personally keeping watch over the plains would not be in such a state of chaos. Of course, keeping him in the imperial capital and causing the plains to enter a state of chaos was also a step for Feng Xingjian to invade the plains and kill their warriors. Although these people were all divine-level experts and had joined Feng Xingjian in name, in reality, none of them had gained Feng Xingjian's trust. Therefore, he would not provide them with the double moon's projection. Over the next few days, the 6 divine-level experts paired up and started to familiarize themselves with the double moon's projection. Tyrant and Prince Philip were both at Tier 3 of the divine level and were in one group. The blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor were both at Tier 3 of the divine level and were in another group. Lan Yu and the 4th prince had both just stepped into Tier 2 of the divine level and were in another group. It just so happened that the 6 of them were in 3 groups. Feng Xingjian hoped that they could improve further through the double moon's projection. After they had been working together for a few days, Feng Xingjian sent out a clone that crossed the sky and arrived in the sky above the Bi's region's Wolf's Roar Mountain at light speed. Today was the day that the immortal child and Feng Xingjian had agreed to meet. The Wolf's Roar Mountain was a lonely mountain at the borders of the plains. The mountain stood alone in the vast land, like a wild wolf howling toward the sky. The entire mountain wall was made up of bare rocks, and there was almost no grass growing on it. At the top of the cliff of the Wolf's Roar Mountain, a man in white robes stood quietly. His white robes were covered with many golden runes, and each rune kept on twisting and changing like a moving book. It was as if they recorded all sorts of secrets in the world. The man seemed to be in his early 30s. His face was like jade, and he had an elegant demeanor. He gave off the feeling of a distinguished scholar. Light and shadow flashed behind the man, and Feng Xingjian slowly stepped out of spatial gaps. If the man in white robes was said to be like a distinguished scholar, suave, elegant, and graceful, Feng Xingjian, who was dressed in loose black robes, was like the temptation of the devil. His pale skin and bright red lips seemed to contain a demonic charm, tempting everything in the world to pounce toward him. Looking at Feng Xingjian, the man's gaze could not help but light up slightly. What a great heart sword! The immortal child? Feng Xingjian's martial will collided with the other parties in midair, and he said calmly, "Why are you looking for me?" The immortal child took a long look at Feng Xingjian and said, "They really look alike. They really look alike." "You're talking about the previous pope?" Feng Xingjian asked. "That's right. You're 80% to 90% similar to the previous pope. It's just that your dispositions are completely different." The immortal child sighed and said, "Do you know why the extraordinary sun and Seiko Kaitian think that you're formed from a demonic fetus?" Feng Xingjian asked why. "It's because they're afraid that you'll go back and snatch their things," the immortal child said. The immortality saint said, 20 years ago, before the previous pope disappeared, he split the church's strongest divine remains equipment into 3 parts and handed them to me, the phenomenal saint and the Tianhai saint. Chapter 907. 20 years ago, he prophesied your existence and asked us to pass the divine remains equipment to you before the 7th onslaught. Feng Xingjian was slightly surprised. He had not expected this to be the case. 20 years ago. Isn't that when I was born? The immortal child did not care about Feng Xingjian's surprise and continued. Based on what he said, 16 years later, a young man who looks like him will appear out of nowhere and stop the 7th onslaught. The 3 of U.S. saints will have to preserve this divine remains equipment before he appears and hand it over to you to help you stop the 7th onslaught. As he spoke, the immortal child put out his palm slightly, and a stream of white light slowly rose up from his palm. However, the white light was too piercing. Even though Feng Xingjian used his martial will to scan it with all his might, he was unable to see through the depth of this white light. "This is..." Feng Xingjian frowned slightly. The immortal child sighed and said, "This is a part of the church's strongest divine remains equipment, a level 39 divine weapon, the White Emperor Zenith Sword. The White Emperor Zenith Sword is said to have been forged from the bones of the god of universal truth. It contains the strongest powers in the world. The immortal child sighed and said, "Of course, at our level, we also know that this can only be a legend. But even if it's not forged from the god of universal truth's bones, it's definitely the best divine weapon in the world. It's also a sacred item that has been passed down in our church for 10,000 years. Although the previous pope's prowess shook the world, the three of us still find it hard to respect his final order." Feng Xingjian did not say anything, but he knew that what the immortal child said was right. How could the world's best divine weapon, a sacred item that had been passed down in the church for 10,000 years, be handed over to him just because of a few words? In fact, the Pope should have known the outcome as well. Then why would he pass down such an order? This was something that even the current Feng Xingjian had no way of knowing. However, this final order was mixed together with the information that Feng Xingjian had received previously, shrouding the entire matter in a layer of mystery. Therefore, Seiko Kaitian and the Extraordinary Son later announced that you were the demon fetus and swore to kill you. The immortal child said, "But I feel that the previous pope was a heavenly genius. His actions must have had a deeper meaning." However, over the past 20 years, even though we've only obtained 1/3 of the White Emperor Zenith Sword, the three of us have improved at a tremendous rate. I believe that as long as we have this divine equipment, it'll only be a matter of time before we reach Tier 6 of the divine level. Hence, be it me or the other two, we're all the more unwilling to hand the White Emperor Zenith Sword to you. The other two are also eyeing the White Emperor Zenith Sword covetously, wanting to merge the three into one. The immortal child's words explain the ins and outs of the entire matter. He also clearly expressed his and the other two saints' attitudes, explaining the irreconcilable conflict between the two parties. None of the three of them wished to hand over the White Emperor Zenith Sword. However, the immortal child's attitude toward Feng Xingjian was very gentle. The other two were worried that the Pope had left behind a contingency plan and that Feng Xingjian would snatch away the White Emperor Zenith Sword. Therefore, they wanted to kill him as soon as possible. The fact that the immortal child could say these words clearly showed that he had the intention of joining forces with Feng Xingjian. Therefore, Feng Xingjian looked at him and asked directly, "What do you want to do?" The immortal child said, "Feng Xingjian, with your current strength, if you join forces with me, you'll have a chance to go up against Seiko Kaitian and the Extraordinary Son. Among the three of them, I'm also the only person you can choose to join forces with." Feng Xingjian said calmly, "Joining forces requires sincerity." "Haha!" The immortal child laughed out loud, and a stream of information currents leaped into Feng Xingjian's mind. This is the Church's Trice technique, which is passed down in secret. At our level, we should know that the 9-tiered heavens is actually going to other worlds. However, there are many worlds in the multivariate universe, and they are all different. Some of them are even different from our world in terms of time. For some, 1 day might have passed, but 1 month might have passed on our side. For some, 1 month might have passed, but only 1 day might have passed on our side. The Trice technique allows you to choose the time span when you're challenging the 9-tiered heavens. Feng Xingjian's eyes seemed to light up. The reason why you guys can improve so quickly is because you've relied on the 9-tiered heavens to come to other worlds and then have more time to cultivate. He thought that with this method and the double moon's projection, the abilities of the divine level experts under him would increase tremendously. Even he himself would have more confidence in clearing Tier 6 of the divine level. The immortal child said, "This is one aspect. How's my sincerity?" Feng Xingjian nodded and also sent out a stream of his will, sending over the first 5 levels of the mystical prince. The immortal child looked at the information on the mystical prince and praised sincerely, "Good, this is really good stuff. To think that there's still someone in this world who can create something so amazing and change one's aptitude so easily. It's really unbelievable." The immortal child had been drooling over the mystical prince that Feng Xingjian had grasped for a very long time. In his opinion, This was something even more valuable than the Trice technique. After all, there was a limit to one's lifespan. The Trice technique would only increase one's cultivation speed, while the mystical prince would increase one's cultivation limit while increasing one's cultivation speed. This was what was truly valuable. In the immortal child's opinion, with the mystical prince and the Trice technique, both his and Feng Xingjian's powers would increase tremendously. They would also have the confidence to go up against the other two saints. The immortal child nodded and said, "Since that's the case, why don't we sign this agreement?" With that, he tapped out in the air, and a stream of white light descended from the sky. It turned into a light talisman and slowly floated down between the two of them. Feng Xingjian scanned it with his martial will and understood the information contained in the light talisman. This light talisman was called the Truth Light Talisman, and it was created using a type of divine art from the Holy Sea of Truth. Once both parties had set up the contents of the agreement, they were not allowed to go back on it. Once they did, a portion of their knowledge and memories would be stripped away by the God of universal truth. At their realm, knowledge and memories were extremely important. Once they were lost, their realm would regress, and in serious cases, their powers would dissipate. The consequences were severe. Feng Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said, "How do you want to cooperate?" The immortal child laughed and said, "Before we kill the extraordinary sun and Seiko Kaitian, the two of us can't be enemies or fight each other in the dark. How about that? If there's a day when you're able to defeat me, who has the White Emperor Zenith Sword, then I'll believe that you're indeed the person chosen by the Pope, and I'll be willing to give you my share of the White Emperor Zenith Sword." This agreement sounded very relaxed and had a high degree of freedom. However, to experts like them, it was the most suitable. After all, who would be willing to be restricted at their level? The fact that the immortal child was willing to give up the White Emperor Zenith Sword showed that he was extremely confident in himself and had good intentions toward Feng Xingjian. "All right." Feng Xingjian threw a glance at the immortal child and said, "If you give me your share of the White Emperor Zenith Sword, I can give you the remaining 5 levels of the mystical prince." Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, the immortal child broke into a satisfied smile. With a single thought, the contents of the Universal Truth Light contract changed, becoming the contents of the agreement. Feng Xingjian tapped slightly, and a hint of martial will gushed out. At the next moment, the hint of martial will that the two of them had sent out merged into one in the Universal Truth Light contract. With that, the agreement was completed, and the Universal Truth Light contract turned into a myriad of light spots, dissipating into the air. Feng Xingjian silently sensed the changes in his martial will and felt that there seemed to be some interference. As long as the thought of killing the immortal child crossed his mind, there would be an inexplicable sense of threat rising in his heart. It was as if as long as he really took action, he would lose something. After the immortal child signed this agreement, he seemed to have felt as if a huge burden had been lifted off his chest. He smiled and said, "The extraordinary sun and Seiko Kaitian have strong foundations, and they also have over 10 guardian kings under them. Moreover, they have the White Emperor Zenith Sword. It'll be extremely difficult to kill them, even after reaching Tier 6 of the divine level. However, there's a fortuitous encounter that can help us succeed." Feng Xingjian's heart skipped a beat. He was thinking about whether he should occasionally use the double moon's projection to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level together with the immortal child. Chapter 908. The immortal child naturally could not tell what Feng Xingjian was thinking about. He asked directly, "Brother Feng, have you heard about the recent matter regarding the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures?" Feng Xingjian said, "I know a little. Could it be that the immortal child knows about the inside story?" The immortal child smiled. "It's a long story. Brother Feng, do you know that among the 3 saints, the extraordinary sun is in charge of criminal law, Seiko Kaitian is in charge of preaching, and what I'm in charge of is the historical records and the understanding toward the teachings?" Feng Xingjian nodded slightly. Each of the 3 saints was in charge of different areas. Regardless of whether it was criminal law, preaching, history, or teachings, they were all extremely important and had great authority. This was also the reason why the three saints had been in a stalemate for many years without a victor being decided. 1,000 years ago, 7 heaven-supporting demons came from the Western land and brought about an overwhelming massacre. In the end, the strongest Tulip dynasty contacted the 3 strongest experts in the world, Saint Adam, the god of fear Dante, and the current pope. They joined forces to seal the 7 heaven-supporting demons one by one. The immortal child sighed and said, "In order to prevent the seals from being broken, making it impossible for anyone to find and break the seals on them, the 3 experts sealed off all information. However, just in case, the Pope also left behind a backup plan. Once the seals show signs of breaking, I, the saint who is in charge of history, will receive a warning." As he spoke, the white robe he was wearing trembled slightly, and streams of golden words floated out from his long robe. The white robe that the immortal child was wearing was not an ordinary item either. It was a level 35 divine remains equipment, and it was said to have recorded all the secrets and history of the Holy Sea of Truth, the Samsara robe. This long robe was in charge of recording history and interpreting the teachings. It was said that the golden runes on the long robe recorded the history of the entire world from the beginning of the world to the present. Right now, the words that the immortal child was displaying were regarding the history of the 7 heaven-supporting demons. Once the 7 seals showed signs of weakness, the Samsara robe displayed a piece of history from 1,000 years ago. These 7 people are known as the Quanji 7 people. They are all perfect and have the foundation of the Great Tao. According to the records, these 7 people came from the Western land and are very likely to be the successors of the Divine Sun Emperor. And the reason why they came to our side is to search for the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures. Hearing the amount of information, Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered. The Divine Sun Emperor went to the Western land. And those 7 people are still alive after more than 1,000 years? To us, the Western continent is an upper realm. The immortal child said, the experts there have the means to increase their lifespans. Therefore, when some divine-level experts feel that their lifespans are about to come to an end, they head out to search for the Western land. As for those 7 people, they've only managed to survive in the seal because they've mastered the method of converting their lifespan and strength. Search? Feng Xingjian said, "Is it very difficult to find the Western land?" The immortal child smiled, looked at Feng Xingjian, and said, "Since you're from Earth, you should know that although the way to return to your world is through the sea, your world isn't actually in our sea. It's the same logic for the Western land. If you head toward the Western Sea from here, there'll be an overlapping space, and you'll be able to reach the Western land. However, that stretch of space will disappear and reappear at irregular intervals. It's not easy to discover." A hint of comprehension flashed in Feng Xingjian's eyes. He finally understood what the Western land was all about. To ordinary Westerners, it was true that they had taken a big ship and crossed the sea to arrive at Miracle World. However, it was the same as Demonic City. They had traveled from one world's sea to another world's sea. It was just that there was a small area of overlap between the 2 world seas. However, these 7 people thought that they came from the higher realm and didn't care about the living beings in this land at all. The moment they arrived, they stirred up bloodshed. This was why they were attacked and then sealed, the immortal child said. However, it's because they've mastered the method of converting their lifespan and strength that they're able to keep on depleting their strength and maintaining their lifespans while they're sealed. 1,000 years have passed, and their strength has probably reached its lowest point. Feng Xingjian asked directly, "What do you want to do?" "I want to make use of them to find the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures," the immortal child said. The Immortality Saint said, "The 7 experts at Tier 6 of the divine level and above are at their weakest moment. This is a rare opportunity. It's because once they're sealed again, we won't have any chance to communicate with them." Feng Xingjian narrowed his eyes and said, "You want them to break out of the seal and follow their traces to find the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures?" The immortal child smiled and said, "There's 7 experts after all. Although they're weak now, we can't underestimate them. Brother Fong, it's a little too risky for you to do this. My plan is to send people to isolate 6 of the seals and prevent them from breaking out. Meanwhile, the 2 of us will go all out to kill one of them and force them to reveal the location of the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures." "That works." Fong Xingjian nodded in agreement. "But as you said, the other party is an expert at Tier 6 of the Divine level and above after all. If you and I can step into Tier 6 of the Divine level, it'll be safer for us to take action. If we can step into Tier 6 of the Divine level, it'll naturally be easier to deal with them. If we can then find the Divine Sun Emperor's treasures, we'll really be able to suppress the extraordinary Sun and Seiko Kaitian," the immortal child said. "However, it's extremely difficult to reach Tier 6 of the Divine level. If we're the slightest bit careless, we'll die. Before I'm completely confident, I won't try to transcend it." Fong Xingjian fell silent for a few seconds before saying, "I have an idea that can allow us to step into Tier 6 of the Divine level faster." With that, Fong Xingjian sent the double moons projection technique to the immortal child with a single thought. After all, before the other 2 saints were wiped out, it was impossible for him and the immortal child to become enemies. Moreover, the 7th onslaught would arrive in slightly over a year's time. Based on his recorded lifespan, he was only left with 1 year and 3 months. Fong Xingjian no longer had time to squander. Therefore, he wanted to make the best use of his time and strive for Tier 6 of the Divine level together with the immortal child. With the restrictions of the contract, he would at least not have to worry that the other party would betray him. After receiving the information from the double moon's projection, the immortal child's eyes gleamed. To think that there's such a secret technique to transcend the tribulation? Excellent, excellent, excellent. With this secret technique, the 2 of us will have a 100% chance of striving for Tier 6 of the Divine level together. There's no time to lose. We should make arrangements for this breakthrough as soon as possible. I need 7 days' time to make arrangements for the church's matters." Fong Xingjian gave it some thought before replying, "Then let's strive for Tier 6 of the Divine level together in this place 7 days later." These 7 days were just nice for the Divine level experts under him to strive for successive breakthroughs. After he left, they would be able to hold down the fort in the Empire. Chapter 909. The immortal child said, "We mustn't stop with the 7 seals either. I'll settle the 4 in the north and leave the 3 in the south to you. Send people to stop people from exploring the seals and prevent them from escaping. We'll deal with these 7 demons after we attain Tier 6 of the Divine level." After the meeting at Wolf's Howl Mountain, Fong Xingjian immediately returned to the imperial capital's palace and summoned the 6 Divine level experts under him. Looking at the 6 people before him, Fong Xingjian said, "7 days later, I'll enter seclusion to strive for Tier 6 of the Divine level." Hearing his words, everyone present was slightly surprised. Prince Philip was the first to say, "Xingjian, Tier 6 of the Divine level is no small matter. Countless geniuses in history have fallen at this step. You've just attained Tier 5 of the Divine level. Aren't you a little too anxious to strive for it again 7 days later?" The 4th prince also said, "Right now, there's no one who has stepped into Tier 6 of the Divine level in this world. Xingjian, there's no need for you to be in such a hurry. You can try to strive for it after your preparations are complete." Right now, Fong Xingjian could be said to be the entire empire's pillar and the strongest expert in the south. Everyone present was naturally unwilling to see anything happen to Fong Xingjian. "I've made up my mind." However, Fong Xingjian said directly, "I have 100% confidence in making a breakthrough this time around. Before I enter seclusion, you guys must use the Twin Moons projection to clear the trials in groups over the next 7 days to increase your strength. You'll be able to help me hold down the fort in the Empire while I'm not around." With that, Fong Xingjian sent the church's secret technique for clearing the trials to the snap of fingers into the minds of the 6 people present with a single thought. Since Fang Xingjian had already made up his mind, everyone understood that it was impossible for them to persuade him otherwise. At the sight of the church's secret technique for clearing the trials, everyone's breathing quickened, and they revealed looks of pleasant surprise. When you use the secret technique to clear the heavenly barriers, you can choose to go to some worlds where the time flow is much faster. A few months might have passed there, but only a few days might have passed here. This will increase your success rate and also give you more time to cultivate. Therefore, everyone started to comprehend the profoundness of the snap of fingers, preparing to break through to the next level of the heavens. The first to clear the trial was Tyrant and Philip's group. Both of them had reached Tier 3 of the divine level, and they could be said to be the two strongest out of the 6 in terms of their realms and abilities. Tyrant's lips curled into a cold smile, and the murderous aura around him grew thicker. Then I'll be going. Philip smiled faintly. Let's go. The two of them turned into two beams of light and soared into the sky, disappearing into the clouds in the blink of an eye. 6 hours later, the Tier 3 divine level blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor exchanged a glance and smiled. There seemed to be an invisible tacit understanding between them. The two of them had been in the Xingwu region for many years, respectively in charge of the Myriad Stars Palace and the Full Moon Temple. They could be said to have known each other for a very long time, and their comprehension of the twin moons' projection during this period of time was very effective. Now that they looked at each other and smiled, they each took a step forward. Regardless of whether it was their disposition or their actions, they gave off a feeling as if they were one person. Even their martial wills seemed to have become one. Thank you, Imperial Preceptor, for giving us a new lease of life. We'll be going now. Fang Xingjian nodded. At the next moment, the two of them also disappeared into the clouds with a flash. After another few hours, Lan Yu and the fourth prince finally finished their preparations. The two of them were experts who had already stepped into the second tier of the divine level and possessed the 3 secret arts: Mystical Prince, Twin Moon's Projection, and Instant Flicking. They also had legacies from a Mystic Abyss, Heavenly Emperor, and the Full Moon Temple respectively, and were striving for Tier 3 of the divine level. Their success rate could be said to be the highest. The fourth prince nodded toward Fang Xingjian. I'll be troubling Imperial Preceptor from now on. It's fine. Fang Xingjian waved his hand. At the next moment, the fourth prince turned into a sword shadow, piercing through the sky and dashing out toward the 9 heavens. Lan Yu took a long look at Fang Xingjian. To begin with, she had some admiration for Fang Xingjian. Right now, when Fang Xingjian's heart sword was revealed, it was like the world's most attractive poison. Lan Yu's gaze could not help but reveal a strange expression. At the next moment, Lan Yu broke into a brilliant smile and soared up into the sky, following closely behind the fourth prince. Wait for my return. Looking at the empty hall before him, Fang Xingjian closed his eyes and started cultivating. For the next 7 days, he would wait here for the 6 of them to successfully advance and return. Of course, he had also given orders for the 7 seals to be dealt with by the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, female saint, Princess Wuxian, Ferdinand, Charlot, and the others. About 6 days later, 2 streams of extremely majestic auras that were like brilliant suns descended from the sky. All the experts in the imperial capital were astonished. Sensing that the 2 gushes of auras had disappeared from the palace, all of them were surprised and bewildered. Fang Xingjian opened his eyes and looked at Tyrant and Prince Philip. Right now, their dispositions were completely different from when they had left. Even their clothes had been changed into metal armor, and there were hints of killing auras on their faces. They had clearly experienced a series of great battles. Fang Xingjian smiled. It seems that the 2 of you have successfully stepped into Tier 4 of the divine level. Tyrant let out an emotional exhale. We stayed in that world for close to 5 months. That land had been divided up by the Mage Association and the Holy Sea of Truth. The 2 influences kept each other in check, and there were also monsters from other universes invading. Thankfully, the 2 of us joined forces and killed all those monsters, restoring history to its rightful place. But we also put in a lot of effort. A hint of lingering fear flashed in Philip's eyes. We don't know where those monsters came from. They're very difficult to deal with. It's good that you're back. Feng Xingjian's martial will swept across the sky. The astral ancestor and the blue sacred moonlight should be back soon. It was a pity that one day later, on the day of the appointment with the immortal child, the astral ancestor, the blue sacred moonlight, the fourth prince, and Lan Yu were all unable to rush back in time. However, Feng Xingjian no longer had the time to wait. He handed the matter over to Tyrant and Prince Philip and flew up into the sky alone. There, his clone from Demonic City's son had already arrived. The two bodies merged into one, and Feng Xingjian immediately sensed an explosive power seething in his body. This time around, I can take this opportunity to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level and train myself properly through the lengthening of the time. The instant sword, heart sword path, and divine country all require a long period of hard work to cultivate. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at Wolf Howl. The immortal child was already waiting there. The two of them exchanged a glance and smiled. "Let's go, please." A short moment later, the two figures disappeared from this world. There were still countless universes, and the countless timelines flashed before Feng Xingjian's eyes. When he finally arrived at his destination and stopped moving, Feng Xingjian opened his eyes and felt a little strange. My body? Am I that strong? Terrifying powers seethed in his body, giving him the feeling that he was too strong right now. Simultaneously, a stream of silver light cut across the sky and appeared before him. It wrapped itself around Feng Xingjian's finger at a speed that surpassed Feng Xingjian's reaction. Feng Xingjian from Earth, you possess the unparalleled determination to reach the ultimate level. Welcome to the White Army. Chapter 9-10. White Army. What's this? Feng Xingjian looked at his finger in astonishment. There was a pure white ring fixed firmly on his index finger. An intense power was passively transmitted out from it. Feng Xingjian could sense that there was an endless amount of power contained within it. Just as he was wondering what it was, a voice rang out in his mind. It was the immortal child's voice. I sense that this is very similar to the God of Universal Truth's power. God of Universal Truth? Wait a minute. You. Feng Xingjian's eyes shot out streams of sword light. He finally realized the reason why his body was so powerful to the point where it was abnormal. The immortal child let out a bitter laugh. It might be some sort of mutation caused by the double moon's projection. We've merged together. Feng Xingjian's martial will scanned his body crazily. He sensed that about 2/5 of the seething powers in his body did not belong to him, and they did not even listen to his control. That was the immortal child's power. After coming to this world, they had merged into one due to the double moon's projection. Just as Feng Xingjian was feeling troubled by the current situation, another 2 streams of light flashed in the sky, and seething powers were emitted. Again, Feng Xingjian's brows twitched, and he darted into the spatial gaps with a single step. However, a stream of purple light seemed to ignore space and followed him in. With a flash, it arrived on Feng Xingjian's other hand. Feng Xingjian from Earth, you have the ability to transmit love to others. You belong to the Purple Army. With a cold snort, Feng Xingjian's right hand, which had the ring on it, was disintegrated. Then with a flash, he broke through the atmospheric layer and arrived in outer space. However, after his disintegrated right hand recovered, the purple ring was still on his hand, unscathed. The other silver ring in the stream of light followed him, penetrating through space, disappearing and then appearing on his left hand. In that instant, silver energy burst out, scattering across the entire sky like a sun. Immortal child from Miracle World, you have the ability to carry out justice. Welcome to the Silver Army. In the blink of an eye, 2 more rings appeared on Feng Xingjian's body. A total of 3 rings, white, purple, and silver in color. Every single one of them seemed to contain a boundless amount of power seemingly inexhaustible. This is the power of the demon gods. The immortal child sighed. What is going on with this world? Demon god, Feng Xingjian suddenly came to a realization. No, the twin moon's projection allows one to enter another world. However, the immortal child and I, one of us is from Earth, while the other is from Miracle World. Logically speaking, I should have gone to Earth's parallel world, while the immortal child should have gone to Miracle World's parallel world. We come from two different worlds. Is this the reason why the double moon's projection changed? Just as Feng Xingjian was thinking about these, the immortal child said, "Someone is coming. No matter what, let's hide first and understand the situation in this world." Feng Xingjian nodded slightly. At the next moment, with a flash, he disappeared into the vast starry sky. He did not even return to the planet under his feet. Instead, he turned into a stream of invisible waves and flew toward another planet nearby at light speed. Not long after he disappeared, 3 beams of light, white, silver, and purple, descended from the sky. It was as if 3 invisible powers had collided fiercely. Countless wills were transmitted to and fro. What happened? How long has it been since something like this happened? Search at full power and find the mastermind. There are 3 rings. There are at least 3 people who have obtained extraordinary powers illegally. Find them and kill them all. Let them learn reverence. The orange-red surface of the planet was filled with deserts. What could be seen with the naked eye were sand dunes and gravel. There was no liquid water at all. Sand and dust floated in the atmosphere, and from time to time, sandstorms would occur. Raising his head and looking over, as the atmosphere was too thin and there were many and large dust particles, a portion of the red light that came from the sun was scattered, causing the entire setting sun to appear blue. This was Mars, one of the 8 planets in the solar system. Stepping on the gravel on the surface of Mars, Feng Xingjian raised his head and looked at the starry sky, determining the universe he had arrived in. Is this still Earth's parallel universe? It's also because of this that I'm the master. After the fusion, I'm still the one who controls most of the conjured physiques and powers. The immortal child had clearly thought of the same question and said, "It seems that we came from different worlds and arrived in different parallel worlds." The double moon's projection technique has also undergone a mutation because of this. Feng Xingjian nodded. After understanding the problem with the fusion, he and the immortal child discussed if they could separate. However, the moment they controlled their powers and separated to the sides, they felt that there was a drag between the powers, and they were unable to differentiate them clearly. They were like 2 bottles of ink mixed together, and it was hard to tell who was who. This won't do. After trying again and realizing that they were still unable to separate, the immortal child decided to give up for now. There's no way to separate them for now. We can only make do with this. Feng Xingjian started to observe his lifespan. The reason why he had used the instant snap to come here was so that he could gain more time. However, if his lifespan did not allow it, then it would be meaningless. However, the situation was the same as what he had encountered in the Mystic Abyss Vault. After a total of 40 seconds, his lifespan was only reduced by 1 second. This meant that there was a time difference between this world and Miracle World by 40 times, yet his lifespan was not affected at all. Excellent. After determining the basic problems, Feng Xingjian looked at his palm again. He saw that there were a total of 3 rings on his left index finger, ring finger, and right index finger. They respectively emitted a purple, silver, and white glow. What on earth are these? Feng Xingjian sensed that they contained astonishing powers. With a slight thought, his body burst out with endless white light. Within this light, it seemed as if he could materialize anything as long as he wanted to. Therefore, as his thoughts changed once again, the surrounding white light quickly took shape, turning into all sorts of aircrafts, cannons, flying swords, armor, and even many white birds flying in a Martian atmosphere. The immortal child sighed and said, "What astonishing powers! There's no need to understand the principles or cause and effect at all to be able to create whatever you want to create." Feng Xingjian looked at the various materials that the white light had created, and his interest was piqued. With another change in his thoughts, a white city appeared on the surface of Mars. Everything appeared from nothing. Buildings made from reinforced concrete, streets filled with heavy traffic, and all sorts of trucks, vans, sports cars, and sedans moved to and fro on the roads. Several million people walked on the streets. Some were eating, some were working, and some were shopping. They were even conversing, watching television programs, or using their cell phones. Every part of the city was so detailed that it was like the real world. Moreover, this was something that Feng Xingjian had created with a single thought. Chapter 9:11. This is really unbelievable. At the sight of this scene, even Feng Xingjian was astonished. He did not think about the specific principles at all. He merely thought of these things, and the white glow automatically limited the several hundred million items and several million humans before him. At the thought of this, a hint of curiosity flashed in his eyes. He started to wonder what the limits of this ring were. Therefore, the white city suddenly disappeared, and nuclear missiles appeared in the sky one after another. Hundreds and thousands of nuclear missiles lined up at once, amounting to several tens of millions of nuclear missiles. Each of them contained a soul-stirring power. Then, Feng Xingjian's thoughts changed once again. A spaceship that blotted out the sky and sun appeared in the sky above Mars. The sudden appearance of the spaceship, which was over 30 kilometers long, caused a storm that swept out for several thousand kilometers. On the long white battleship, several 100,000 cannons opened up in unison, and white energy surged in each of the cannons. Such power! A gleam shone in Feng Xingjian's eyes. This is too amazing. This time around, the white battleship disappeared once again, and a pure white flame appeared in the sky. It then instantly swelled up into a huge fireball. This was a sun. A pure white sun was instantly born in the sky and rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it was about to reach a size of several hundred kilometers. The entire Martian land trembled violently, and the geomagnetic field was greatly disturbed. The temperature of the atmosphere rose rapidly. Just as the entire Martian land was about to be ignited, Feng Xingjian's will change slightly, and he retracted the white sun. The corners of Feng Xingjian's lips curled up into a hint of a smile. After the sun disappeared, a black hole suddenly appeared in the air. It was a black hole. The sudden appearance of the black hole immediately sucked in a large amount of matter. However, it had just expanded to a size of several thousand meters and absorbed 10 million tons of matter when the entire black hole evaporated completely. Feng Xingjian could sense that the energy in the ring was still surging like the mountains and seas. However, he could no longer borrow any of it. Is there a limit to the amount of energy that can be used? Feng Xingjian then looked at the purple ring. With a single thought, purple light burst out, turning into many sharp swords that appeared in the sky. All of them were the various swords that Feng Xingjian had used along the way. There were even Thunder Calamity, Abyss, and Panway among them. Every single one of them had the exact same powers as before. It's also a materialization ability. Feng Xingjian was experimenting with the power of the purple ring. Suddenly, with a thought, the purple light formed a human figure. It was his appearance. However, no matter how hard he tried, the human form was still a human form. He could walk, run, jump, and even talk like those animals before. But at the end of the day, it was just a form. It didn't have true life and will. Only by materializing matter will it work. Life cannot truly materialize. Following that, Feng Xingjian spent a few days experimenting with all the abilities of the ring. Almost all the substances that he could think of could be materialized by the ring's energy. However, there was a daily limit to the amount of energy that he could borrow. Therefore, he could create a miniature sun, but he couldn't create a real star. He could create the Panway sword, but he couldn't create the legendary White Emperor Zenith sword. There were also things that existed in his imagination, such as many of the myths and legends in Demonic City. He could only create an illusion, stacking them up based on his imagination. He couldn't really materialize them. After experimenting with the ring's abilities, Fang Xingjian looked toward the distant Xian Kong and suddenly asked, "Immortal child, what do you plan on doing next? Since we can't separate, I'll just cultivate in your body. This world is sufficient for us to cultivate for 1 to 2 years. Since it's because of this world, we should be able to recover after we return to the land," the immortal child said calmly. The immortality saint said calmly, "Moreover, these 1 to 2 years are sufficient for me to improve rapidly and temper the things that I haven't been able to properly digest." Fang Xingjian moved slightly and broke through the atmosphere, leaving the Martian environment. He looked toward Earth. "However, we can't just go into seclusion like this," Fang Xingjian said. "We must constantly pay attention to the situation on Earth and guide it slightly, letting the situation operate according to our will. When the need arises, we'll be able to complete the mission immediately and clear this stage." The immortal child nodded in agreement. This was indeed the case. If they were to clear the stage, it would be too troublesome if they had to spend a tremendous amount of time to lay out their plans in battle. After all, they could not leave Miracle World for too long. Therefore, they must have complete control over the situation. When the need arose, they would be able to turn the tables and clear the stage. Only then would he be able to cultivate with peace of mind and clear the stage at any time when the need arose. Fang Xingjian sensed the feeling brought about by the sudden inspiration. With a thought, he turned into an invisible electromagnetic wave and flew out toward Earth. On Earth, in the depths of the Kunlun Mountains, a group of over 10 men and women were carrying backpacks and wearing stormtroopers as they crawled on a stretch of snow plains. A golden-haired lady, who was in the lead, shouted, "Li Hui, how long more before we can arrive?" A man with a full beard at the back of the group said, "We'll be able to pass through the snow plains in about 10 kilometers. When we get there, we'll rest for the night. After crossing 2 mountains and a valley, we'll be able to reach the White Army's base." The golden-haired lady cursed and continued to walk on the snow plains with great difficulty. However, the determination in her eyes grew increasingly intense. "I must join the White Army. I've already tried the other 12 armies. This is my only hope." However, just then, a whistling sound rang out in the sky. 2 streams of golden light traversed across the sky and flew toward them. The man by the name of Li Hui looked at the 2 streams of golden light and said nervously, "They're from the Gold Army. They must be from the Bara clan." The golden-haired lady said furiously, "To be able to fly with the ring's energy, they must be at the colonel level of the Gold Army. Do they still have any shame?" Just as everyone was speaking, 2 streams of golden light descended from the sky and stood before the golden-haired lady. They were 2 Caucasian warriors who were encompassed in golden light. The golden light turned into armor that encompassed their bodies, allowing them to float above the ground. They looked down at the couple before them. The gold warrior in the lead looked at the golden-haired lady with a greedy expression and said, "Jessica, you should know what we're here for. State your price. If we're satisfied, we might be able to let you off." Chapter 9:12. Looking at the greedy gazes of the 2 gold warriors, Jessica's heart sank. She understood what this represented too well. The 13 armies on Earth represented 13 types of powers. As long as one wore the ring, they would be able to activate the powers in the ring and display all sorts of unbelievable abilities. The most common ability was the ability to materialize. In order to wear the ring, one would need to be qualified, and the qualification would depend on one's personality. One would only be able to wear the ring and activate the powers in it if one matched the personality of the ring. As for how much power one could activate, it would depend on one's will. The people who could activate the strongest powers were the commanders of the various armies. Jessica looked at the gold army before her. The gold ring represented their personality and their thirst for knowledge. They wanted to know everything, understand everything, and pursue the truth of the universe. However, Jessica just so happened to have something on her that was extremely attractive to them. In order to satisfy the 2 gold warriors, Jessica knew that she would probably have to bring out that thing. However, she still held onto the slight hope that the other party did not know of the existence of this thing. Therefore, she gritted her teeth and said, "I don't have anything anymore. My clan has frozen all of my assets, but I can first put them on credit. As long as I pass the White Army's test and become a white warrior, I'll be able to get back everything that I've lost. When the time comes, I'll give you guys a satisfactory reward." Assets? The gold warrior licked his lips, and the greed in his eyes grew increasingly intense. What we want isn't just this. What we want is knowledge, the knowledge that's hidden on you. Hand over that page of the Book of Wisdom that you've obtained. The other gold warrior smiled evilly. "We can let you off." Jessica's countenance sank. She knew that the thing she was most worried about had happened. The thirst for knowledge that the color gold represented made the gold warriors want to possess all kinds of knowledge. With the commander in the lead, everyone in the gold army had a great thirst for knowledge. Compared to fighting for fame and wealth, they spent more time in the laboratory, ceaselessly exploring the profoundness of the universe. Jessica should have known long ago that the only thing that could attract these nerds out of the laboratory was the page of the Book of Wisdom that she had. The Book of Wisdom had been discovered in a cave on the back of the moon in 2008. There was a total of 2,333 pages, and it recorded countless amounts of knowledge that far surpassed this era. It was a pity that in order to get their hands on the Book of Wisdom, the 13 armies had engaged in a great battle, and the 2,333 pages of the Book of Wisdom had been scattered across the world. Each lucky person who managed to get a part of it had either been beaten to death or had become an expert who could dominate the world. Jessica had unintentionally obtained a page and thought that she was destined to receive it. However, she had not expected that she would fail all 12 armies' tests consecutively. She did not even have the right to put on the ring. Jessica asked, "What Book of Wisdom? I don't have that kind of thing." Before she could finish her sentence, she saw a golden warrior wave his palm, and a golden blade of light slashed out from the side of his palm. It swept out like a golden laser beam, instantly slashing the 5 men and women beside Jessica into 2 at the waist. Bright red blood sprayed out and landed on the white snow, even emitting hot steam. At the sight of this, the remaining 10 over men and women bellowed furiously. They drew their automatic rifles and were about to shoot at the 2 golden warriors. Unfortunately, metal sparks lit up on their bodies, but the bullets could not penetrate the faint golden light on their bodies. They could not even make them take a step back. Ignorant. One of the golden warriors let out a cold laugh, raised his blade, and slashed down. Another 5 men and women were slashed at the waist. They cried out agonizingly as they fell to the ground, their intestines and internal organs splattering all over the ground. "Stop," Jessica said furiously. "All of you stop. Stop fighting." The men and women who had been shooting also stopped in fear. They looked at the 2 golden warriors with pale countenances, as if they had only just recalled how terrifying these monsters were. The golden warrior in the lead flicked his finger and said, "Have you had enough? Hand over the Book of Wisdom. My patience is limited." Jessica said with a gloomy countenance, "At least tell me who you are." "Haha, are you looking for revenge? You're welcome to do so any time," the Caucasian man in the lead said. "I'm Claude from the Barra clan, the Gold Army's colonel. You better think this through before you seek revenge. This time around, I snatched something from you and bullied you. Therefore, I'll spare your life. However, if you want to take revenge on me next time, I won't hold back." Jessica smiled mockingly, as if mocking the other party's hypocrisy. However, she sighed inwardly. That Claude from the Barra clan who has recently risen in fame? As expected, their clan has set their sights on me. Just then, a cold voice rang out, long-winded. Before anyone could react, a figure descended from the sky and stepped on Claude's head. Under the pressure of a violent force, Claude's head exploded like a tomato. However, the violent power did not stop there. It continued to spread down through Claude's spine, chest, and internal organs. Wherever it passed by, his body would turn into meat paste. In the end, only a pool of blood and flesh could be seen splattering on the ground. There was no longer any sign of Claude. Everyone looked at this scene in astonishment. To think that Claude, who was at the level of colonel, had been stomped into meat paste by an unfamiliar man. Claude was an existence who could single-handedly deal with a modern special forces unit, countless firearms, and could fly at supersonic speed. To think that he had been stomped to death. At the next moment, everyone looked at the black-robed man who had suddenly appeared, and their eyes were in a daze. The other party's eyes were like a pair of bottomless black holes, wanting to suck everyone's souls into them. Only the other Gold Army's warrior retreated over 100 meters away with a swoosh. He said furiously, "Who are you? Do you know who the person you've killed is? Today, everyone here will be buried with you. They'll all die because of you." Everyone, who had been in a daze earlier, also reacted at this moment. Jessica's countenance turned grim. If it was said that she had lost a page of the Book of Wisdom, then not only would she lose this page of the Book of Wisdom, but she would also have to face the Bera clan's crazy vengeance. It was a great clan that had a legacy of 5 generations in the Gold Army and had general-level existences. Their powers had far surpassed Jessica's imagination, and she could not even muster up any will to resist. Faced with the threat from the remaining Gold Warrior, Fang Xingjian could not be bothered to reply. He merely clenched his fist across space, crushing the remaining warrior into a lump of flesh and blood that scattered into the air. At the sight of this scene, Jessica's countenance twitched once again. She smiled bitterly and looked at Fang Xingjian. "Why were you so rash? Do you know that you've gotten yourself into big trouble?" Chapter 9:13. Fang Xingjian did not reply to Jessica's question. Instead, when his gaze swept past her body, a hint of surprise flashed in the depths of his eyes. It was because the Jessica before him looked almost identical to his good friend Jessica back in Demonic City. It was just that Jessica had betrayed him after he left home and was eaten up by Tyrant in the end. The Jessica in front of him should be the Jessica in a parallel world. However, none of this mattered. The reason why Fang Xingjian had come to the Kunlun Mountains was because he had been following his sudden inspiration senses. He knew that this was the crux for him to clear the trial and that he needed help with something. However, after arriving at the Kunlun Mountains, he realized that this feeling had spread out within a range of several hundred leagues. However, no matter how he searched, he could not find the true source. Instead, he discovered the existence of Jessica's group. From their conversation, he understood whose influence the Kunlun Mountains belonged to. The White Army? Based on what they said, there are 13 armies on this earth. They should be the 13 demonic gods' influences, and not like how it was in Miracle World where the Holy Sea of Truth is up against the remaining 12 mages. Fang Xingjian thought, based on the way things have been done in the past, they want to guide the parallel world's history toward Miracle World. In that case, do they want me to help the White Army fight against the other 12 factions? And there's also this ring. It's probably best to let the night cultivation technique replace the powers of this ring. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian already had a plan in mind. However, Jessica felt increasingly infuriated by how Fang Xingjian was ignoring her. She could not help but ask, "Which faction are you from? Why did you kill Claude?" Fang Xingjian did not reply. Or perhaps he could not be bothered to answer her question. He grabbed Jessica with one hand and flew up into the sky. "Bring me to the White Army's base." "Let go of me," Jessica said furiously. "You've already offended the Gold Army. Are you still thinking of offending the White Army? Even if you don't wish to live, I still want to live. They won't be able to kill me," Fang Xingjian said coldly. "And as long as you're by my side, no one on this planet will be able to kill you." Jessica laughed exaggeratedly. "Who do you think you are? The 13 heroes?" Fang Xingjian frowned and asked, "Who are the 13 heroes? Are they very powerful?" Jessica rolled her eyes, feeling speechless. The 13 heroes were the founders of the 13 armies and the first extraordinary humans in history to put on rings. They had saved all of humanity during the calamity and were the legendary heroes. The fact that the other party didn't even know about this made her speechless. "What exactly do you want? Bring me to the White Army." Fang Xingjian's gaze turned cold as he coldly stated, Maybe I've been too polite and made you forget the fact that your life is now in my hands." A hint of anger flashed in Jessica's eyes. "All right, you want to die?" She pointed. "Go that way." Hence, Feng Xingjian flew and stopped under Jessica's guidance. After traveling for tens of kilometers, he arrived at the peak of a snowy mountain. There was an abandoned temple at the peak of the mountain. Feng Xingjian followed Jessica into the temple and frowned. He had searched this place previously, but had not discovered anything special. Just as Feng Xingjian was thinking of this, Jessica took out a white ring and said, "Open the door." Looking at the white ring on Jessica's hand, Feng Xingjian scanned it with his martial will and discovered that this ring was no different from the one he had. It was just that the 3 rings on his hand had all been concealed by his illusory arts, and no one could see them. Just as Jessica took out the white ring, streams of white light were emitted from it. The white light formed a door, and when the door opened, it revealed a stretch of white valley. Spatial door. Feng Xingjian was slightly stunned. The energy in the ring can form something like this. Why are you still in a daze? Are you scared? Jessica turned and threw a glance at Feng Xingjian. Right now, she understood that since she was unable to stop this unfamiliar man, she might as well bring him to the White Army and let the people there deal with him. Feng Xingjian smiled, grabbed Jessica, and crossed the door, arriving in this stretch of white valley. The entire valley was milky white, and the sky was a faint bright white. The grass, trees, and sand beneath their feet were all pale white. The animals and birds in the valley also seemed to have been dyed in a layer of white paint. This was a pure white world. Feng Xingjian scanned this small world with his martial will and sighed. Amazing. To think that you can use the ring's powers to form a small world. It's no wonder that I couldn't find any traces of you even after searching the entire Kunlun Mountains. You're praising us too much. As they spoke, a young man dressed in a white Taoist robe with his hair casually draped over his shoulders appeared before the two of them. With a slight wave of his hand, he grabbed the white ring in Jessica's hand and gently put it on his finger. He smiled and looked at Jessica. "Miss Jessica, congratulations. You've obtained the right to further your training. If you can put on the ring, then the White Army welcomes you." Priest Tai. Jessica ran behind the young priest at the speed of a 100-meter dash. She pointed at Feng Xingjian and said, "I was forced to come here by him. He killed the Gold Army's Claude." Priest Tai frowned. He had sensed a familiar aura from the other party earlier and had a slightly favorable impression of the other party. However, when he heard that the other party had killed Claude, his hostility rose up. "Who are you? Why are you making a move on the people from our 13 armies?" "There's no need for you to know who I am," Feng Xingjian said calmly. "This is the White Army's headquarters, right? Get your leader to come out. I have something to say to him." Hearing Feng Xingjian's shameless words, Priest Tai's brows raised up high, and he became stern. "What nonsense, a junior. The commander isn't someone you can meet just because you want to." Feng Xingjian said calmly, "I have nothing to say to you. Just bring me to meet your commander." "Young man, do you know what you're saying?" Priest Tai asked with a frown. Jessica said, "Priest Tai, be careful. He only used 1 foot to trample Claude to death." "Oh, so he's an expert?" Priest Tai assessed Feng Xingjian in detail. "Which army are you from? Do you know that by killing Claude, you've brought great trouble to your elders?" "He's just an ant." Feng Xingjian waved his hand and said, "I came here today to meet the White Army's leader and see if he's worthy of my support." Arrogant. Priest Tai had already treated Feng Xingjian as a junior who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Moreover, he felt that he had already exercised forbearance repeatedly, yet Feng Xingjian was still being so overbearing. Therefore, he wanted to teach Feng Xingjian a good lesson. As Priest Tai spoke, he slapped out with his palm, and white light rose up from his ring, turning into a huge palm the size of a field. It slapped out fiercely toward Feng Xingjian. The ferocious power was as if a palm had lashed out, causing the air to explode. Under the strong gales, all the plants in the entire valley trembled. The intense air currents blew into Jessica's eyes, making it almost impossible for her to open them. Faced with Priest Tai's palm, Feng Xingjian appeared calm. He even had the time to use his martial will to scan that white palm. He understood that this palm was not purely using brute force. Instead, it was using white energy to simulate the circulation of martial forces. This palm was equivalent to a palm strike that a Tier 1 divine level expert had sent out across space with their martial will. Chapter 9:14. The huge white palm slapped down with the force of the sky collapsing. It could destroy a street and crush over 10,000 people into meat paste with a single attack. For this person to be able to kill Claude with a single attack, he's probably at the level of a major general or even a lieutenant general. However, I've long since reached the level of a general. Moreover, in the sacred white crevice, my powers have increased by at least 3 levels. With this palm, even if he doesn't die, he'll be seriously injured. Just as Priest Tai thought that his palm attack would be sufficient to subdue this unfamiliar man, Feng Xingjian raised his palm slightly. Ring? Come to think of it, I have one too. In that instant, piercing white light burst out from his hand. The white light intertwined and turned into a sword shadow that soared into the sky, piercing out toward the palm that Priest Tai had unleashed. As if he had been inspired by the other party, Feng Xingjian used the white energy as his martial will, turning it into the all-conquering sword intent and thrusting out. Under Priest Tai's astonished gaze, the huge palm that he had condensed was easily shattered like a piece of tofu. It was minced into a myriad of light spots by the white sword shadow. Swoosh! The sword shadow paused for a moment and then crossed the air, piercing out toward him. Priest Tai instantly felt waves of tremendous pressure gushing toward him. It was as if the entire world had disappeared, and only that white sword shadow filled up his entire field of vision. Boom! He slapped out with his palm once again, and white energy gushed out from void space like tidal waves, striking out incessantly toward the sword shadow. The white energy seemed to have come to life in his hand, turning into blades, spears, staffs, and various other martial techniques that struck out from all directions and angles. He was forced back more than 1,500 meters by the sword shadow, and only after retreating for another 1,500 meters did the power of the sword completely dissipate. Right now, Priest Tai's countenance was pale, and his eyes were filled with horror. Probably only their strongest expert, the commander of the army, would be able to do this. To think that the other party was also an expert at the level of a commander. Priest Tai stared at Feng Xingjian and said, "Who on earth are you? Why do you also have a white ring? I've never seen you before." Feng Xingjian said calmly, "Lead the way. I want to meet your commander." Man Tai looked deeply at Feng Xingjian and said, "Come with me." Since the other party already possessed the strength of a legion commander, he was naturally no longer someone he could stop. Jessica was dumbfounded as she watched Feng Xingjian leave with Tai Renren. How could she have imagined that Tai Renren, the strongest warrior she had ever met, would actually be defeated by a stranger? Just who was this person? Looking at the two leaving figures, Jessica gritted her teeth and followed after them. The sacred white crevice was a small world established using white energy. It was also the White Army's headquarters. Everything in this world seemed to be white. Whether it was the animals, the plants, the mountains, the rocks, or the sky, everything was white. In the depths of this world, on a plaza with a base of white jade, over 10 men and women were sitting cross-legged. Among them, there were Asians, Caucasians, and even black people. There were old people, middle-aged people, boys and girls. However, right now, all of them were wearing white Taoist robes and listening to the lecture solemnly. The person giving the lecture was an old man who was extremely thin and weak, and his long white beard reached the ground. The old man appeared drowsy, as if he would fall asleep at any moment. However, he kept speaking, explaining the usage of the white energy. The white ring requires a firm heart to pursue Tao. However, the path of pursuing Tao is like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't advance, you'll fall behind. What it needs is for you to focus on your cultivation at every moment, every minute, and every second. If you slack off in the slightest, not only will the ring's energy that you can activate decrease, but might even regress and lose the right to possess the ring. The old man said calmly, "Therefore, our white army has always been the one with the least number of people among the 13 armies. However, the upper limit that we can reach is also the highest. It's because the stronger one's heart to pursue Tao, the more resolute one's will be. The white energy complements one's temperament and will." Everyone listened to the old man's explanation seriously, even though what he said was a cliché. It was because he was the strongest expert in the White Army, the Commander Longmai, who had the most seniority and was also the oldest among the 13 armies. Just then, an explosion suddenly rang out in the distance. Then the earth trembled intensely, and a series of tremors shook the mountains. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. Everyone who was still listening to the lecture immediately stood up, looking in the direction of the explosion in bewilderment. What's going on? Is it a battle between experts at the major general or higher level? It's over. Just as everyone was feeling bewildered, Priest Longmai opened his sleepy eyes. A gleam flashed in his turbid eyes, and he said calmly, "Don't make a fuss. Everyone, sit down and continue listening to the lecture." Everyone in the White Army still believed in the commander's authority. Hearing Priest Longmai's words, all of them sat back down and continued listening to the lecture and cultivating. A few minutes later, Priest Tai brought Fong Xingjian and Jessica to the training ground. The appearance of the two unfamiliar men and women immediately attracted everyone's attention. The reason why everyone's attention was attracted was because Fong Xingjian's heart sword had manifested, giving off an indescribable attraction. Everyone was unknowingly attracted to him, and they even developed a slight favorable impression of him. Priest Longmai lifted his head and focused his gaze on Fong Xingjian. He said, "Why have you come from afar? May I know why?" Fong Xingjian laughed and walked up. "From today onward, the White Army will be under my control." As Fong Xingjian said this, the slight favorable impression and attraction they had toward him instantly disappeared. They even turned into an even deeper sense of disgust. Unknowingly, everyone's emotions were being controlled by Fong Xingjian. "What audacity!" A black man jumped up and bellowed furiously, "This isn't a place for you to be impudent." With a rumble, it was as if another invisible hand had pressed down in the air. Before the black man who had jumped up could finish his words, he was sent flying out. His white robes were torn into shreds, and he fell to the ground, unconscious. "Does anyone else have any objections?" Fong Xingjian asked calmly. Seeing his actions, everyone from the White Army was enraged. Even Priest Tai, who had been pushed back by Fong Xingjian with a single move, was burning with fury. White energy soared into the sky from his body. They were from the White Army, one of the 13 armies. They were humans who had grasped extraordinary powers. When had they ever been bullied like this before? However, just as streams of white light soared into the sky, Priest Longmai stood up slowly and said, "Do you really wish to make an enemy out of our White Army?" Fong Xingjian said coldly, "I'm not here to make an enemy out of you. I'm just here to lead you guys." Chapter 9:15. In an instant, killing intent seethed in the eyes of everyone from the White Army. Priest Longmai's killing intent also soared. Fong Xingjian looked at Priest Longmai and said, "You're the White Army's commander, right?" Before his words ended, Fong Xingjian appeared before Priest Longmai with a slight flash. Fong Xingjian's movement at akin to light speed had completely surpassed everyone's imagination. His movement was comparable to light speed, and no one was able to react in time. Priest Longmai was the only one who slapped out a palm hurriedly. White light seeped out from every single pore in his body, and extremely pure white energy gushed into every single one of his cells. Under Fong Xingjian's martial arts scanning, Priest Longmai was constantly drawing out the white energy from the ring and circulating it in his physical body. It was as if he was constantly using the ring's energy to support and strengthen his physical body, turning his physical body into an existence that was close to a conjured physique. The strength of this White Army's commander was almost at Tier 2 of the divine level. Right now, the ring's energy throughout his body was seething, circulating and stacking up in a strange method. It gathered in his palm and turned into a white vortex. This sudden palm attack was already comparable to Priest Tai's full-powered attack. Faced with Priest Longmai's palm attack, Feng Xingjian did not dodge at all. He allowed Priest Longmai's palm to land on his chest. A loud rumble rang out, and streams of air currents spread out in all directions with Feng Xingjian's chest and Priest Longmai's palm at the center. The earth seethed and strong gales seethed. No one could withstand the sweeping air currents and retreated frantically in all directions. Priest Tai also grabbed Jessica and pulled her over, retreating a distance of over 1,000 meters. In the center of the battlefield, Feng Xingjian appeared before everyone unscathed. Feng Xingjian was already very powerful. Moreover, his body now contained the immortal child's powers. After the two of them merged, their battle prowess had increased by multiple folds. It could be said that even Feng Xingjian himself did not know what level he could reach if he were to go all out. Patting off the invisible dust on his shoulders, Feng Xingjian looked at Priest Longmai and said, "Your technique is superb, but your strength is too weak. This is your full power?" Priest Longmai's countenance was extremely grim, and white energy gushed out from his body once again, forming a huge white dragon around him. The giant dragon twisted its body, causing the air to tremble. Each and every one of its movements seemed to gently shake the entire small world. This was Priest Longmai's ultimate technique. He had used the ring's energy to condense a white dragon in his body for 100 years. Almost all of his strength, spirit, and will were gathered together. It was also the foundation of his Tao pursuit. In the future, he wanted to reincarnate into this white dragon after his death and step onto the true path of the great Tao. At the next moment, the huge white dragon let out a long roar toward the sky, and its entire body swelled up rapidly as if it had transformed. It was like a divine dragon from beyond the heavens, dashing out toward Feng Xingjian. The huge white dragon cut across the land and instantly engulfed Feng Xingjian's entire body. Then, without stopping, it continued to shoot out, traversing a distance of over 10 kilometers. Wherever it passed by, not a single blade of grass would grow, and all matter would be completely dissolved by the white energy, turning into a vacuum state. After performing this move, Priest Longmai seemed to have aged by 10 years in an instant. Even more wrinkles and age spots appeared on his face. A hint of pain flashed in his eyes. "It's a pity. I've trained hard for 100 years, but all my efforts have gone to waste." As for Feng Xingjian, he did not think that Feng Xingjian would be able to survive that earlier attack. The high-density white energy could vaporize any matter, and no life would be able to survive that attack. This was his ultimate trump card. The white dragon, which had most of its powers depleted, would require at least over 10 years before it could be condensed again. This was why Priest Longmai felt so pained. If it was not because the battle prowess Feng Xingjian displayed was too astonishing, he would not have been so decisive in using this move. However, at the next moment, his pupils contracted abruptly, and his eyelids opened wide. He looked in disbelief at the spot where Feng Xingjian had been standing earlier. A human figure was floating in midair. It was because the few meters of ground under his feet had been vaporized by that earlier attack. The figure before him was none other than Feng Xingjian, who had remained unscathed from this attack. At the sight of this scene, Priest Longmai seemed to have aged once again. Even his full-powered attack was unable to do anything to Feng Xingjian. How powerful was Feng Xingjian? The people from the White Army all wore astonished expressions. Even Priest Longmai's full-powered attack was unable to do anything to Feng Xingjian. Even if all of them were to join forces, they would probably not be able to harm a single strand of Feng Xingjian's hair. Jessica was dumbfounded. She had thought that Feng Xingjian was courting death. However, by the looks of it, Fang Xingjian was like a ferocious dragon that had crossed a river, turning the entire white army upside down. For a moment, the entire training ground fell silent. Everyone's gazes were focused on Fang Xingjian, as if waiting for his decision. From today onward, I'll be in charge of the white army. As he spoke, he lifted his palm, and streams of white light were emitted from his ring. They formed a white robe and covered his body. Do you guys have any questions? Fang Xingjian's voice was like a thunderbolt that had descended from the heavens. It instantly spread throughout the entire small world, shaking up the world and almost causing everyone's muscles and bones to turn numb. Those who were slightly weaker fell to the ground, unable to get up. It's a white ring. He's also a member of the White Army? Everyone was surprised. Priest Longmai's expression was one of shock and bewilderment. He thought, this is the ring that ran out to choose its owner some time ago. That means it has only been a few days since this person obtained extraordinary powers. How is that possible? Looking at the people before him, Fang Xingjian said calmly, next, gather the entire White Army and have all the warriors return here. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Everyone's emotions went from good to furious, to astonished, and then to puzzled. Their every action was under Fang Xingjian's control. At the next moment, a white light pillar gushed out from Fang Xingjian's body. Astonishing white energy seethed, gushing out in all directions like milky white shockwaves. It was as if they wanted to fill up the entire small world completely. Everyone was encompassed by this unprecedented amount of white energy. Right now, the energy that Fang Xingjian displayed was more than what they had seen in their entire lives combined. At this moment, everyone suddenly had a feeling that for a person who could develop the white ring to such an extent, if he did not become the White Army's commander, then who else could? At this moment, everyone's gazes were filled with respect when they looked at Fang Xingjian. Outside the small world, Fang Xingjian's palm opened up slowly, and the entire sacred white crevice appeared in his palm. Everyone's actions were reflected in his martial will. From the beginning to the end, everything that everyone had seen was just an illusory art that Fang Xingjian had created with a single thought. When he had found a White Army's base, the entire small world had already been in his hands. This casual illusory art was just to subdue this group of White Army's warriors. Therefore, over the next few days, the news of the White Army changing their commander and gathering all the white warriors swept through the entire world like a hurricane. The warriors from the other 12 armies learned of this. Chapter 9:16. In a huge space station in Earth's outer space, a man covered in golden light floated in the space station. The golden light turned into many threads and gushed out from his brain, connecting to the space station's computer. Sets of experimental data kept on flashing before his eyes. This man was the Gold Army's commander, as well as the head of the Bara clan and the Gold Army's absolute leader, Edward. Just then, a projection appeared before him. It was a gold warrior who was half kneeling on the ground. He was one of the generals in the Gold Army, and his name was Barnett. However, even though he was only second to the Gold Army's commander, only a few other generals could compare to him, he was still half kneeling before Edward. At this moment, he was half kneeling in front of Edward, his face filled with deep reverence. What happened? General Barnett said, Sir, Claude died on the Kunlun Mountains' snowy plains. The White Army's commander has changed to someone called Fang Xingjian. Based on the information we've received, Claude's death is related to this Fang Xingjian. Despite hearing that Claude had died, the White Army's leader, changing, seemed to be unable to stir up any ripples in Edward's heart. He said calmly, That's all. General Barnett was stunned for a moment before nodding. There seemed to be only countless experimental data jumping around in Edward's eyes. He said, I got it. Barnett was stunned for a moment before asking, Then, sir, do we need to take any action? Edward said coldly, We'll talk about it after I finish this set of experiments. But the Book of Wisdom, it's fine. In outer space, gravity and electromagnetic forces changed at the same time. Light rays started to distort, and hints of flickering glow appeared on Edward's body. Other than me, who else on this planet has the right to hold the Book of Wisdom? Edward said in a matter-of-fact tone. Release the news of the Book of Wisdom and let them fight amongst themselves. I'll finish this set of experiments and then go clean up the mess. Looking at the changes in the space before him, the respect on Barnett's face grew even more intense. He sighed inwardly. As the collection progress of the Book of Wisdom continues to increase, the commander's growth in strength has become increasingly terrifying. The people from the other armies will never understand how much ahead Lord Edward is of them. This is an absolute difference brought about by knowledge and wisdom. In the small world of the sacred crevice, Feng Xingjian was reading a book with great interest. In front of him, the white-boned sword danced in the air, flickering as if it was shuttling through the void. The immortal child's body slowly emerged from the sword. He nodded in satisfaction and said, "We've finally separated." During this period of time, the immortal child had been cultivating in seclusion in Feng Xingjian's body. However, he had unintentionally thought of a method that was not really a solution. It was to transfer his consciousness to a divine equipment, just like how divine-level experts would have their clones. Among the 4 divine swords, the white-bone sword was the weakest in nature. Due to the fact that the instant sword was too profound and unfathomable, it was very difficult to improve its sword intent. As a result, it was currently the weakest. Therefore, it was taken over by the immortal child and temporarily separated from Feng Xingjian's body. Although the white-bone sword was a little weaker, it was sufficient for the current immortal child. He turned to look at Feng Xingjian and asked, "Brother Feng, have you figured out anything?" Over the past few days, Feng Xingjian had read through the White Army's manuals. Due to the history of this planet, the 13 armies had appeared several hundred years ago. The ones who had the strongest desire to pursue the Tao were naturally the ascetic cultivators from the Buddhist sect, Taoist sect, and other religions. Therefore, from several hundred years ago, the White Army's main force had always been them. Their cultivation method was to circulate the ring's energy using the method they had cultivated arduously in the past. It was as if they were cultivating immortality through martial arts. Right now, Feng Xingjian was reading through the secret manuals in the White Army's collection. Hearing the immortal child's question, Feng Xingjian said, although they went in the wrong direction from the start, they still managed to find a way out. After all, several hundred years of practice allowed them to unleash a portion of the ring's powers. That's right. How could there be no results after using the white ring's energy to experiment with all sorts of martial techniques and move for several hundred years? It was just that these results were still a far cry from Miracle World's martial arts. After all, the history of extraordinary powers in this world was too short. The immortal child said, "The trial at Tier 6 of the divine level is definitely extremely dangerous. Since they want us to help the White Army dominate the world, then the White Army's strength is probably very different from the other 12 armies." Feng Xingjian added, "Or perhaps there are other powers that we don't know about hidden on this planet." The immortal child nodded in deep agreement. All of them understood the dangers of Tier 6 of the divine level and that it was definitely not that simple. Simultaneously, Priest Longmai led over 10 other priests who were also wearing Taoist robes and walked through the sacred white crevice, slowly heading in Feng Xingjian's direction. These priests were the White Army's warriors who had rushed back from the outside world in response to Priest Longmai's call. Behind him was a middle-aged priestess. Her brows were raised high, and her hair was white. Her eyes were filled with pernicious auras, and it was clear that she was a person who was not easy to talk to. It was one of the White Army's generals, Priestess Yen. Other than the commanders, the 13 armies were further divided into the ranks of general, colonel, lieutenant, and private. The generals were further divided into generals, lieutenant generals, and major generals. Priestess Yen, who was at the general level, was already a top-notch character in the White Army. Right now, she was following behind Priest Longmai with a displeased expression. "Martial uncle, why do we have to listen to that kid? No matter how amazing he is, we'll just fight it out with him. If we can't fight it out, we'll just die." Which member of the White Army would be afraid of death? Right now, We're surrendering in order to survive. What's the point of seeking the Tao and cultivating to become an immortal? I've been feeling so aggrieved over the past few days that I can't even meditate. Priest Longmai shook his head, and a strong sense of respect flashed in his eyes. Ever since Fong Xingjian displayed unfathomable abilities and unleashed an explosive burst of energy that could fill up the entire sacred white crevice, Priest Longmai's attitude toward Fong Xingjian had changed. His attitude toward Fong Xingjian had become extremely respectful. Hearing Priestess Yan's words, he shook his head and said, "You don't understand. This person's body contains the shadow of the great Tao. When I follow him, observe him, and get close to him, I can sense the aura of the great Tao. As long as I follow him, there'll be hope for me to seek the Tao. As the saying goes, if one hears the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening without regrets, let alone some face." Chapter 9:17. Priestess Yin frowned, and the other general-level and colonel-level white warriors also exchanged glances. Aura of the great Tao? All of them felt that Priest Longmai's words were too profound. Priest Tai was the only one who revealed an expression of deep agreement. Priestess Yin, who had a fiery temper, was the first to be unable to hold it in and say, "Martial uncle, aren't you going overboard? No matter how amazing that Fong Xingjian is, he's still a human. It's just that he's ahead of us in terms of the usage of rings. To say that he has some aura of the great Tao is really..." At this point, Priestess Yin could not continue. If it was not Priest Longmai, but someone else who spoke this way about Fong Xingjian, she would have given them a good scolding. When the others heard Priestess Yan's words, they nodded inwardly. This was also what they were thinking. Priest Longmai seemed to have seen through everyone's disbelief and sighed, saying, "You'll understand when you meet him." A short moment later, everyone arrived at the valley where Fong Xingjian was. The white bone sword had disappeared. The immortal child had just left on his own, and no one knew what he had gone to do. Fong Xingjian sat cross-legged, floating in midair. He emitted a cold and aloof aura, like a gem in the darkness. At the sight of Fong Xingjian, everyone was astonished by his appearance and disposition. It was as if they had never seen a human like him before. Even Priestess Yan's expression seemed to have lessened a little. Fong Xingjian lifted his head and threw a glance at the few people present. There were 2 generals, 3 lieutenant generals, 1 major general, and some other experts at the colonel and captain level. The White Army is now under my control. The reason I've summoned you guys here today is to tell you about the direction of the White Army's development. Wait a minute. Right now, Priestess Yin had already recovered from her astonishment at Fong Xingjian's appearance. She looked at Fong Xingjian and said, "Fong Xingjian, if you wish to subdue us, you can't expect us to submit to you with just a few words, right? If you want us to submit to you, show us what you've got." After saying that, she stared coldly at Fong Xingjian. Other than Priest Longmai and Priest Tai, the few warriors from the White Army behind her were also looking at Fong Xingjian coldly. It was as if they wanted to test Fong Xingjian's capabilities. Hearing Fong Xingjian's words, Fong Xingjian smiled. Almost everyone in the White Army had the courage to face death with equanimity. All of them had the courage to die for the sake of pursuing Tao. Fong Xingjian had long since understood that it would be difficult to subdue them with pure violence. Moreover, in order to clear this stage, it was impossible for him to kill too many of the White Army's warriors. Therefore, Fong Xingjian nodded and said, "You're right. If we can get you guys to submit just by talking, then you guys aren't fit to be members of the White Army. Then I'll show off my skills first." At the next moment, Fong Xingjian took a step forward and moved at akin to light speed, appearing before Priestess Yin with a flash. Before Priestess Yin could react, Fong Xingjian had already tapped a finger on her head. Priestess Yin was about to activate the powers in her body when she felt that her body had become lighter at the next moment. She felt as if her consciousness and soul had been struck out by Fong Xingjian's light finger. She could easily see her weak consciousness and her physical body falling backward slowly under Fong Xingjian's finger. What have you done? She wanted to shout out, but realized that she was unable to make any sound at all. At the next moment, a wave of suction force came from behind her, and countless light shadows intersected before her. She realized that she had arrived in Earth's outer space. In her line of sight, the entire blue planet was shrinking rapidly. She was flying away from Earth at an unparalleled speed, and the starlight around her was dragged into a long line. Behind her, the huge fireball was getting bigger and bigger, and the scorching flames soon filled her entire field of vision. It's the sun. Seeing that she was dashing toward the sun at an unimaginable speed, even Priestess Yin, who was a top-notch expert in the White Army, could not help but reveal a terrified expression. The size of the sun, which surpassed Earth by 1.3 million times, and the fact that there was no end to it no matter how one looked at it, was enough to make any human who witnessed it feel inferior. It was as if a scream rang out from the depths of her soul. At the next moment, Priestess Yin discovered that she had bumped into the sun. There were endless flames, explosions, high temperatures, and high pressures. Other than flames, there were only flames. It was as if there was no end to them. This feeling was as if an ordinary human had fallen into the ocean and reached a depth of 10,000 meters. An endless sense of terror appeared in her heart. This was an instinctive fear that humans had toward natural powers. At the next moment, as she continued to go deeper into the sun, many miniature black holes appeared before her amidst astonishing explosions. With a dash, she darted into a black hole. In that instant, a series of light and shadows changed, and she appeared in a strange world. There were colorful lights everywhere, and many planets seemed to have been compressed into spots that were hard to see with the naked eye. The densely packed spots kept on flowing in space. As they flowed, the continents on the surface of the planets moved at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye, and the atmosphere seethed. Countless flowing spots gathered together, forming a river with no end in sight. One end of the river was the past, while the other end was the future. In every inch of space in the river, each light spot kept on splitting up, turning into countless light spots that scattered out. This caused the river to have endless tributaries. The endless tributaries seemed to want to fill up every inch of space, causing one to be unable to see the true appearance of the world. However, Priestess Yan's body continued to rise. As she rose, she could see more and more rivers and spots of light. The past and future of the entire universe seemed to be presented before her, bit by bit. Finally, when she reached the peak, she seemed to see the entire universe gathered together. At the next moment, as Priestess Yin continued to rise, this gathering also seemed to have turned into a light spot. It gathered together with the surrounding light spots, forming an extremely huge vortex. Countless unknown substances were gushing out from the center of the vortex. At that moment, big and small seemed to have lost all meaning, and time and space seemed to have been abandoned. Any observer would find it hard to describe how big the vortex before them was. The scene before them seemed to have turned into eternity. By the time Priestess Yin reacted, she had already knelt down on the ground, and tears were flowing down from the corners of her eyes. These were tears of being moved. They were the joy of being close to achieving her dreams. It was an indescribable feeling of great joy and joy. Is that all real? What do you think? It was an extremely realistic feeling, and there was no sense of falsehood. The scenes were even scenes that Feng Xingjian had seen when he was traversing worlds. They were the truths of the universe. How could Priestess Yin possibly think that they were fake? She looked at Feng Xingjian, prostrated herself on the ground, and her throat trembled slightly. Please teach me. The corners of Feng Xingjian's lips curled up into a hint of a smile. Behind Priestess Yin, the other warriors from the White Army who had been summoned back also prostrated themselves on the ground. Their gazes were filled with great respect. At that moment, Feng Xingjian knew that through illusory arts and the heart sword path he had created, he had gained complete control over the White Army. Chapter 918. 3 days later, in the central hall of the sacred White Crevice, a total of 39 warriors from the White Army were all present. Priest Longmai sat at the very front, and behind him were Priest Tai, Priestess Yin, and other general-level warriors. Behind them were the other warriors of various levels, including Colonel, Lieutenant, and Private. Jessica, who had just arrived, was also seated in the last row. She wore an astonished expression as she looked at Feng Xinjian on the stage. She had never expected that a young man whom she had casually met back then would be able to subdue the entire White Army and become a top-notch character on Earth. Today was the day that Feng Xinjian would be giving a lecture. He understood that if he wanted to change the direction of history, he could not just rely on Feng Xinjian's violent attacks. He would also have to reform the White Army's cultivation method, allowing them to become stronger themselves. Or rather, it would allow them to have a powerful future. Therefore, he spent a few days and created a set of sword technique that circulated through the ring's energy. With Feng Xinjian's current realm, it was a piece of cake for him to do such a thing. This set of sword technique used the Holy Sea of Truth's Universal Truth Longsword as its foundation, combined with several tens of other sword techniques, and was even modified according to the ring's special energy. Regardless of whether it was in terms of prowess or potential, it far surpassed those techniques that the White Army had created themselves. Of course, he would not really be explaining each and every word. The efficiency would be too low. Feng Xinjian used information currents as a medium, channeling the sword technique directly into everyone's minds. Through everyone's five senses, they instantly sensed that something had appeared in their minds. Then their bodies seemed to move on their own, starting to use the ring's energy to condense light swords and perform a set of sword technique. They had been circulating this universal truth longsword repeatedly in their minds, and all the members of the White Army wore intoxicated expressions. They had never expected that there would be a sword technique like the Universal Truth Longsword in this world, that the ring's energy could be used in such a manner, or that the microscopic world would have such profoundness. At this moment, everyone was even more convinced of Feng Xinjian. This was especially so for Priest Longmai, Priestess Yin, and the others. Feng Xinjian was their greatest hope in pursuing Dao. Right now, if anyone went against Feng Xinjian, they would probably fight it out with them. Therefore, over the next few days, Feng Xinjian guided everyone in their sword techniques while diverting 99% of his powers to roam the universe, strolling around the sun, and continuously using the thunder-inducing technique to temper his martial will. Of course, this was only the cultivation of his basic abilities. Feng Xinjian's cultivation plan for coming to this world had been set a long time ago. The first was to perfect the instant sword, allowing all of his celestial eradication sword's sword intents to reach the pinnacle of the microscopic realm and maintain a balance. The prowess of the celestial eradication sword formation would also be perfected. Then, his cultivation of sword, of the heart of the cultivation of the sword. The third was to integrate all the results of the above into his divine country. With the space as the base, the celestial eradication sword formation as the backbone, and the heart of the sword as the soul, he would integrate all the sword arts he had learned into it. Therefore, 99% of his powers continued to go to the sun to strengthen himself, while the remaining remained on Earth. While teaching the White Army sword arts, he continued to absorb and ponder over the knowledge he had obtained from the Divine Emperor in the previous world, as well as the knowledge he had obtained from the wordless monument on Earth. He used them to perfect the instant sword. In the hall, streams of pitch-black sword marks suddenly tore through the atmosphere, appearing in Feng Xinjian's surroundings. These sword marks, slashed out by the instant sword, seemed to have no beginning or end. They came and went without a trace, appearing abruptly. There were no signs that they had been attacked. This was the instant sword, a sword attack that should not have existed at a time that did not exist. This had been very powerful in battles in the past. However, in a battlefield where Feng Xinjian could move at light speed, distort space, and control his powers to the microscopic level, The prowess of the instant sword was too weak, even though he was still unable to fend it off. However, as the nature of the instant sword was too profound, Feng Xingjian was still unable to perfect the sword intent of the instant sword, even though he had continuously increased the prowess of the all-conquering, infiltrating void and light pursuit. The instant sword doesn't just involve the four basic forces, heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces, the Earth's astral forces, nuclear forces, and the forces that cause all living things to decay. It also involves the end of the four great forces, the changes to space-time. Feng Xingjian was immersed in his thoughts regarding the instant sword. Just then, Priest Longmai walked over hurriedly. "Sir, there are rumors going around in the 12 armies that Jessica has obtained a page from the Book of Wisdom." Feng Xingjian's gaze flickered, and most of his attention continued to ponder over his sword arts. Simultaneously, he split out some of his will and asked, "What is the Book of Wisdom?" Therefore, Priest Longmai explained the matter regarding the Book of Wisdom. Upon hearing that the Book of Wisdom had come from the moon, Feng Xingjian's gaze lit up slightly. Previously, he had searched the moon and thought that there were no moon relics in this world. He had not expected that the moon relics in this world were actually a book. Priest Longmai continued, "Sir, the Black Army's grade has sent a message to invite us out to discuss the ownership of this page of the Book of Wisdom. How should we deal with this?" During this period of time, Feng Xingjian also understood that the White Army situation was the same as what he had speculated previously. It was indeed one of the lower ranks amongst the 13 armies. After all, compared to the White Ring, which required one to have the heart to seek Tao, the other personalities, such as the greed represented by the Black Ring, the thirst for knowledge represented by the Gold Ring, the terror represented by the Yellow Ring, the desire to control represented by the Gray Ring, and so on, were easier to realize and persevere with. The Black Army was even more unique. There should only be one person in the entire army. Due to the nature of greed, the person who obtained the Black Ring would not be willing to share the power that represented greed. Therefore, they would engulf each other, leaving only one person behind. That person's body contained the wills of everyone in the Black Army, and only the person with the strongest would be able to control the last person's body. Everything will continue as usual. There's no need to care about the people outside. Feng Xingjian said calmly, "Tell me more about the Book of Wisdom in detail." "Oh, right. Did the White Army manage to get 1 or 2 pages of the 2,333 pages of the Book of Wisdom?" However, Feng Xingjian had not thought of touching the people from the other 12 armies. However, he was unable to stop the people from the other armies from wanting to test the capabilities of the White Army's new leader. After another 3 days, a man wearing a gray suit walked into the sacred white crevice under Priest Tai's lead. As the Gray Army's representative and a general-level character, his eyes revealed a hint of uncontrollable arrogance when he looked at each and every one of the White Army's warriors. "Brother Tai, I didn't expect that the White Army would submit to a single person within a short few days. This is really surprising." Chapter 919. Priest Tai lowered his head, as if he did not hear the sarcasm in the other party's words. Lord Feng Xingjian's cultivation is world-shaking, and he sees through the profoundness of the world. It's my honor to be able to serve under someone like him. Ha ha, the Gray Army's representative chuckled, feeling increasingly disdainful toward the White Army. He lifted his head and looked at the land in the sacred white crevice, and an irrepressible desire to possess it rose in his heart. This land should also be under the control of the army. The Gray Army had a strong desire to control. The group they formed could be the one with the best discipline amongst the 13 armies. Almost everyone from the top to the bottom had strict rules, and everything was under the control of the commander. The Gray Army's envoy followed Priest Tai to a side hall and saw that Priest Longmai was already waiting there to receive him. Priest Longmai cupped his hands and said, "Long time no see, Mr. Grimm. I wonder why you've come this time around?" Grimm nodded as well. Although Priest Longmai was not at the top amongst the commanders, in terms of experience and age, Priest Longmai was undoubtedly the best. Grimm had to maintain his respect. Priest Longmai, the Gray Army, Black Army, and Yellow Army have decided to hold a meeting to decide on the ownership of this newly discovered page of the Book of Wisdom. When the time comes, the representatives from the other armies will come as well. Hearing Grimm's words, Priest Longmai frowned. He knew that what was to come had come. This was different from how the 13 armies had been fighting over the Book of Wisdom back then. After so many years, the 13 armies had set a rule. After discovering the Book of Wisdom, each army would send a representative to decide on the ownership of this page of the Book of Wisdom. The army that obtained the Book of Wisdom would also have to compensate the remaining 12 armies accordingly. In the past, Priest Longmai knew that his faction's influence were too weak. Moreover, he was focused on pursuing Dao and could not be bothered to participate in the meeting. He would usually just give up. However, now that he had Feng Xingjian as his backing, Priest Longmai became especially confident. He unknowingly straightened his back and said, "I understand. I'll inform the commander about this." Grimm frowned. The other party's confident look made him a little uncomfortable. He could not help but add another sentence, reminding them as if he was concerned, "This time around, Lord Grade is determined to get it. You guys better think about what kind of compensation you want." Priest Longmai smiled and said, "Haha, thank you for your concern. However, this time around, our White Army will probably want to fight for it as well." Green's eyes flashed as he probed. "Is it because of that Feng Xingjian? Old friend Longmai, you have to think this through. Grade isn't someone who is easy to get along with. The Black Army has gathered everyone's wills into one, and he is currently at the critical juncture of clearing the wills. The Book of Wisdom is extremely important to him. Angering him won't end well for you. You don't have to worry about the specifics, Green." A hint of curiosity flashed in Grimm's eyes. He wanted to find out more about Feng Xingjian's background. To think that he had given Priest Longmai so much confidence to go against Grade. However, Priest Longmai clearly did not plan on telling him. After discussing the time and venue for the meeting, he sent Feng Xingjian off. After sending Grimm off, Priest Longmai walked excitedly toward the place where Feng Xingjian was training in seclusion. He wore an excited expression like that of a child. The White Army had been silent for far too long. However, with Feng Xingjian as their backing, it was finally time for them to hold their heads up high. Priest Longmai went up to Feng Xingjian and reported, "Sir, it's really the Black Army's Grade." After not getting a reply from us after a long time, he called for a meeting to jointly decide on the ownership of the Book of Wisdom. Before Feng Xingjian, Jessica sat there quietly, her expression filled with respect. Right now, Jessica was wearing a white ring on his finger. After being able to control the ring's energy, he felt even more how great Feng Xingjian was. Standing before Feng Xingjian, he felt that Feng Xingjian was as vast and boundless as the sky. The power in Feng Xingjian's body was so majestic that there was no end to it. Before Feng Xingjian, there were a total of 12 pages that were neither gold nor silver. They were made from some unknown metal and were floating slowly. They were the pages of the Book of Wisdom. Other than one page, which came from Jessica, the other 11 pages were from the White Army's collection. From this, it could be seen that the White Army did not have a high status amongst the 13 armies. It could be said that most of the discovered pages of wisdom were in the hands of the other armies. Feng Xingjian looked at the Book of Wisdom before him, and a hint of contemplation flashed in his eyes. "Interesting. This Book of Wisdom is very helpful to me. Do you know where I can find more of it?" A few days later, in the city closest to the Kunlun Mountain snow plains, there were many people coming and going, appearing to be extremely lively. In a huge hall, there were staff members making arrangements everywhere. Many video cameras and cameras were set up there like long and short guns. Although they were all from Earth civilization, due to the existence of the 13 armies, the secular world in this world had gone through a great change. Although the governments of the various countries still existed, the supreme rulers had long since been changed to the various armies. Even ordinary people clearly understood the existence of extraordinary powers. This was especially so for the Black Army. The Grey Army's nature allowed them to control many countries. The meeting this time around was also a public event, and it immediately attracted the attention of countless news media. Hello, everyone. This is the latest report brought to you by CATV. A new page of Wisdom Index has been discovered. The 13 armies will each send a representative to decide on the ownership of this page. This is already the 2032nd page of the Book of Wisdom that has been publicly discovered. It seems that it won't be long before all the pages of the Book of Wisdom are gathered. The White Army has changed its leader. Let's take a look at the information regarding the White Army's newest leader, Feng Xingjian. Just then, a series of astonished cries rang out from the crowd, and countless cameras were pointed toward the sky. As a stream of yellow light flashed by, a lady covered in yellow armor slowly descended. The yellow armor on the woman's body was exquisite. While it wrapped around the woman's figure, it also perfectly highlighted her curves. There was no trace of blood on her pale face. She landed on the ground expressionlessly and walked toward the center of the hall. Despite this, the moment she landed on the ground, she caused a great commotion. Expressions of terror appeared on the faces of countless people. Even most of the staff members were breaking out in cold sweat, not daring to look at that lady directly, let alone the surrounding crowd. It's the Witch of Trepidation. Is she the Yellow Army's representative this time around? SSSSS. This lady is very difficult to deal with. It seems that the Yellow Army doesn't wish to give up on this page of the Book of Wisdom either. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.